The 540 is brought to you by StarCityGames.com weekly sale. Go to StarCityGames.com/sale because now until Monday, July 19th at 10:59 a.m. Eastern Time, every single non-English card on Star City Games is 15% off. That is every non-English card 15% off. So no matter what language you prefer, you can save 15% off on all of your non-English cards now until Monday, July 19th at 10:59 a.m. Go to StarCityGames.com/sale. The 540 is also brought to you by Coalesce Apparel and Design. If you want to get the coolest Magic t-shirts and hoodies and stickers, go to coalesceapparel.shop. And if you find something you like, use gift code SCG to save 10% off at checkout. That's coalesceapparel.shop. Nobody made what they wanted, so they made it themselves.
What's up, everybody? Cedric Phillips here, stopping by real quick to let you know about one of Star City Games' newest podcasts, The Receivables, hosted by yours truly, alongside my partner in crime, of course, Patrick Sullivan, where the two of us discuss Magic sets, both past and present, from top to bottom. On every episode of The Receivables, you're going to hear us talk about the facts of a set, the mechanics of a set, the cycles of a set, the boring stuff, before we get into some crazy stories of when we were playing Magic during the times that the set was legal. We've got a ridiculous award show where we give out awards like the Char Rumbler Award for weirdest card in a set, the Oko Thief of Crowns Award for best card in the set, and a whole bunch more. Before we finally decide, hey, what card won the set and what letter grade should we give the set? It's a whole lot of fun. We're having a blast recording them. Hopefully you have the opportunity to listen to it and you enjoy it as much as we're enjoying recording them. Where can you find it? StarCityGames.com or wherever else you listen to your podcast. The Receivables every single week here at SCG.
Welcome back, one and all, to the 540. And I don't want to spend too much time on the intro again this week because, as per usual, for every basically second episode, we're going to be diving in to more new card review. As always, I'm Justin Parnell. You can find me at jparnell1 on Twitter, as I forget my Twitter handle. Obviously, you can see how frequently I use it. And then my partner in crime who uses Twitter much more frequently.
I am Ryan Overturf. You can find me at Ryan Overdrive. And as Justin alluded to, I am terminally online.
Did you get your secret lair chest?
I've been waiting by the door very patiently. And it still hasn't shown up. I think tomorrow is going to be the day.
Yeah, for sure. I believe too. It's got to be coming.
It's got to be. I don't know how they could not send me one.
What metrics are they using to not give Ryan Overturf a chest full of secret lairness?
Yeah, I saw the Wizards promotional item with a bottle opener on it, and I thought, obviously, this is for me specifically.
Yeah. They probably printed extra ones to give to other people, but had you in mind. So surely it's coming soon.
It's got to be. It's got to be.
So before we get into our part 2 of our review in Adventures into the Forgotten Realm, I do want to shout out one of our friends and actually another podcast, Lucky Paper Radio. They are doing a survey for people that are trying cards in this set. You can go to luckypaper.co/survey/AFR and just share what you're testing. And they do this for every expansion, but I thought I might shout them out to see if people can get data. I know you're a fan of data, Ryan, as am
I. You're a bigger fan of data than I am. It is, of course, useful if you have a good mind about it. I think that a lot of people, either knowingly or not, use data to draw bad conclusions. But that's a whole nother can of worms. I don't want to detract from what you're boosting here. It is really cool what Lucky Paper Radio does. They tweeted at us when we did our Call Time set review and when we did the podcast on snow, and they mentioned that a lot of people do snow. 20 some percent of cubes according to their data. And that's just like an interesting factoid to know. So it is really cool. Help them out, fill out that survey, and maybe help yourself out. If there's a question you're not sure about, see what other people are saying about it, see how many people are playing with it.
Yeah. And of course, like Ryan said, I think it's easy to draw conclusions about stuff. Maybe if you're like, oh, everyone's doing this, so I should do this. And that could be a slippery slope, but you have it and are able to interpret it in the way that you want, which is collected from hopefully a large number of people. Mm-hmm. So on to Adventures into the Forgotten Realms. Last week we covered white, black, and blue. However, at the time of recording, not every single card was revealed, and there are a couple that we actually missed just based on the fact of, well, they didn't exist yet, but by the time we got to them.
Yep. A couple white cards, I believe, and blue and black we did justice. Apologies to Asmodeus fans. That card's kind of stinky.
Yeah, we're not... so many pips. We talk about pips on this show all the time. There's one thing that the 540 hates as a podcast, it's pips.
Yeah, Magic's...
And they're just all over the place.
I don't know if we're Magic's only anti-pip podcast. We are Magic's most anti-pip podcast.
That is definitely true. So one of the cards... Actually, before we get into the cards, just a quick rundown, and if you want to get a more thorough rundown, you can check back to last episode. We separate cards into two categories for inclusion into cubes. The first being classic. This is your more traditional cube. This is kind of your best card. So all of the best cards are going to go into this cube. The constraints for what you're working with are usually very small. So this is going to be the best of the best. Everything else we're putting into custom, and that is usually constrained by design environment. So maybe it's multiplayer, maybe it's common, uncommon, etc. There's a lot of different ways you could do exclusions, or maybe just lower power level. And generally, when we talk about a card being in the custom classification, which is the majority of the cards we talk about, we generally try to give some sort of reason as to why we feel that way. So we have two cards for white that we want to go. And one of them specifically has been similar to another card before, but it has one really excellent change. And that is, it has one less pip than it did in the past.
You love to see it.
It's true.
Yeah, it's going to be Loyal Warhound, 1 and a white. It's also a dog. Probably generally less relevant than being a knight. The similar card is Knight of the White Orchid, because this is a 3/1 with Vigilance. When Loyal Warhound enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than you, search your library for a basic plains card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So this land does enter tapped. Knight of the White Orchid does find the land untapped, so that's another difference. Does make the card worse in that respect. Maybe you'd like to have First Strike, but this card is considerably more castable. I do like it more. I think it still gets a custom rating for me.
Agree.
Yeah, probably a pretty solid card on the Arena Cube, but isn't going to hack it in Legacy or Vintage Cube.
Yeah, this is this is Blade of the Six Pride with Upside. Blade of the Six Pride with Upside has been a cubable card many other times. This is something that is providing some card advantage. It's one where you generally, for a 3/1, you kind of want to be on the draw. And if you are, you're going to end up with a 3/1 with Vigilance with no ability that comes along with it if you don't have another turn to play. But, it's still a good 3/1 with Upside. And for that reason, I think it's going to make it into a number of cubes, but it's not going to make it into the most powerful cubes because it's not interacting with your opponent or disrupting them in any way, and the ramp is not assured. So, yeah, custom classification for me, too.
Cool. And then we have a dwarf to discuss.
Yes, Priest of Ancient Lore. This is a dwarf cleric, a 2/1 for 2 and a white, and it simply has the text, when Priest of Ancient Lore enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life and draw a card. This is pretty easy for all common cubes. It is really about card advantage, and this is a playable creature, a 2/1 for 3. It's almost a gray ogre, but also gains you a life and, of course, draws you a card, which is the most important facet of this. Yep. So this is certainly going to be custom for those cubes, but like a slam dunk custom for really low rarity or low power cube.
Yep. The card on balance, I think, despite gaining a life, is worse than Phyrexian Rager, but it's probably better than about 20 or 30 white cards in your Pauper or Peasant cube.
Yeah, it is. It is worse than Phyrexian Rager if you did not know the casting cost of either of the cards, but it is better than Phyrexian Rager because you have less options that are fighting for a similar space.
Yep. Yeah, that's just a Pauper slam dunk right there, and a Peasant strong consideration, if not also slam dunk.
Yeah, probably pretty close to a slam, unless you have like maybe if you have a 360 card Peasant cube, but otherwise if you're at 540 or higher, I can't imagine this is not going to make it in.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's white, and we talked about white last week, so we're already behind. So Ryan, anything else you want to talk about before we get into the review for red and all the other colors?
No, I think that kind of touches it. Again, if you think Asmodeus is good, reread the card. You no longer naturally draw your card for turn every turn. That's all I have to say, because people seem to like that card. And as I've mentioned in the podcast, that's one of my pet peeves. I try to figure out what's going on when people like a card that I don't think is good at all. And I think that's it. But anyway, we got some red cards to talk about.
Indeed, we do. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, adventure into the Forgotten Realms, red cards. Have some extra cards laying around that you want to get rid of? Go to starcitygames.com/sell. It has never been easier to turn your cards into cash, or if you're looking to outfit your cube or commander deck with some new favorites, get a 30% trade-in bonus when you choose store credit. No matter what your collection looks like, we have a method for you. Want to see exactly what every card you have is worth? Check out our buy list. Don't have time for that? Stick it on a box. Send it to us, and we'll make you an offer with our ship and sell program. Or if you want a more personal touch, make your way to the Star City Game Center, Roanoke, Virginia, to sit down with a buyer, just like the old days. With the fastest turnaround time in the industry, get an offer in under 4 days when you go to starcitygames.com/sell. Selling has never been easier. All right. Adventures into the Forgotten Realm. All of the red cards available for cube. Ryan, what do we have first?
Let's open up. We have a couple of classic cards. We'll start with Meteor Swarm. This is a sorcery for red, X. Meteor Swarm deals 8 damage divided as you choose among X target creatures and or planeswalkers. So interesting, it's an X spell, but the X is just for targets. So it always does 8 damage. For 4, you're probably getting a Dreadbore effect. Now this is pretty pip intensive for what you're getting. And this is a generous classic description, but I think that in enough games, if you cast this for 5 or 6 mana and actually clean up 2 or 3 things, you're going to get your money's worth in something like Modern Cube. Maybe this isn't even going all the way up to Legacy Cube. I don't think it's a real consideration for Vintage Cube, but this is going to be a really solid card, certainly in Arena Cube mid-range control decks. And I could see it showing up in a big way in a lot of cubes that have a good clip of planeswalkers.
I like this card. I will also state that I like this card more than the card Cackle with Power. Or Crackle with Power, which we have discussed on the show before. I can't put this in Classic because of the pips. The only reason is you have to be in either mono red or like 75% red, and not all of your, like I would say like less than 50% of your red decks want this. But if you are able to have the red section in your cube not be guns blazing aggro, I think this is actually a really great card because it is exactly what you said. It's basically Dreadbore for X. So 4 is going to get you 1 thing, 5's 2, 6 is 3. When you get to 6 and you're able to just kill 3 permanents, I mean, because 8 damage is essentially going to kill everything. This turns into, then you're comparing it to Plague Wind for that amount of mana with that scales. So I do like this card a lot. I can't quite get to Classic only because I know that the decks this is going to fit in is pretty limited. But when you when you have a deck that can cast this card, it's probably going to be excellent most of the time.
And I might have been slightly generous to the card. I'll grant that. One thing that I don't think we've said explicitly, this set, I think pretty plainly is powered down from what we've been seeing recently. Obviously, we're taking a step away from Modern Horizons, but even as compared to other recent standard releases. And this card becomes one of the considerations, I think, for more powerful cards in this set. But even still, like you said, it's going to fall flat for a lot of cubes. And it is not especially powerful. It's just kind of good in situations in certain environments.
Yep, that's fair. That's fair enough. Okay, so next up, and this is also in Classic. And this one I more agree with, but it's also a far less exciting card. And this is Plundering Barbarian. This is a card you have seen before, almost. It is a 2/2 for 2 and a red, a Dwarf Barbarian. When Plundering Barbarian enters the battlefield, choose one. You either can smash the chest, which is destroy target artifact. So right here we have Manic Vandal, but you also have the option to pry it open and then create a treasure token. If you have any sort of artifactness going on in your cube, and most cubes do, I would imagine this is just a very playable, if unexciting card. But I mean, for my money, Manic Vandal has been like a cube staple for its entirety of its existence, and this is a almost strict upgrade. It's not a human. Manic Vandal's a human, but I think the fact that you can play this and get a treasure, which is, people are starting to come around on how good treasures are. But when you get two good options on this card, that's upgrading an already playable card, it gets the Classic designation for me.
And that is another thing as compared to Manic Vandal. It's not just that you get to make the treasure, it's that you have this also stapled to the other ability not being a May ability, where if you're gonna like mox out your Manic Vandal, if your opponent's not playing their own mox or a signet, you have to destroy your own mana rock. Plundering Barbarian just gives you the treasure token. You can make use of that mana. This is the kind of card that I respect to make it into a lot of vintage cubes. If your legacy cube or you have something more like a modern cube power level has signets, definitely this should show up in an environment like that. And these are all just cards that show up in a lot of classically powerful cubes.
Yep, totally agree. Yeah, I think this is at its worst in a peasant cube, just because meaningful artifacts show up way less. But I mean, otherwise, if you have artifacts around that are powerful, and you do because they're generally very good through all rarities, then this is going to be a great card.
Yeah, and there's even a pretty good clip of mana rocks in Arena Cube. I can't keep track of them all because the way that they put cards on that client doesn't make any sense to me. There's no cohesion to it. But like off the top of my head, I can say that I play with a lot of Mind Stones and a lot of Midnight Clocks. And
Midnight Clock was the big one for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that card's very good in Arena Cube.
Yeah, it sure is. All right, so those are the only two cards we have for Classic.
Yes.
Everything else is from here on out. For red is custom.
Yeah, we're going alphabetically, but I think this is the card that kind of teeters between the two for me. Yep. This is a custom card, but it's Battlecry Goblin. 1 in a red for a 2/2 Goblin. It has an ability for 1 in a red. Goblins you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. And then Pack Tactics. When it attacks, if you attacked with creatures totaling 6 or greater power this combat, you create a 1/1 red goblin creature token that's tapped and attacking. So just as an individual card, if it's a little bit later in the game, it can give itself haste. It has kind of inefficient fire breathing. The token that it makes, not the most relevant thing. It also pumps the token, but usually if you're attacking with that much power, you're doing all right anyway. Or if you're not all right, you're probably really not all right. But anyway.
Yeah. No fault of this card's.
Right. Yeah. A 2-mana 2/2 in red, that's going to hack it. You're just going to play this card a good amount. And for that reason, you maybe could consider it as a classic card. I really wouldn't bat much of an eye at it, even if it's not the most exciting card. As long as it's a red aggressive deck, it'll be fine. Not as good as something like Robber of the Rich, but probably makes decks a good clip of the time. Specifically, though, if you're like rarity restricted or doing some goblin thing, then it does get very good.
Well, that's actually what I was going to say. This card's also custom for me, but only because I think if you were to just grab this and place it into a random cube, it is generally going to be a downgrade. But if you start looking around and you're like, I have a handful of goblins, maybe I'll try to make a couple of these cards better. Like I want Siege End Commander to be a little bit better. This is the effect. If you have a lot of goblins, is actually like really powerful. Mm-hmm. It's just that in most cases, it's just going to be itself, which makes it just okay.
And it's almost desirable that the card's not necessarily worth a removal spell. If you're just hanging out and it's like, well, here's my Horde like outburst. You basically have to kill my Battle Cry Goblin now.
Yeah, I think we're like almost with cards that are like this and cards like Siege Gang Commander, and there's a couple of other ones. Maybe if you have like a sacrifice theme and you have like Mog War Marshal or Beetlebag Chief, and you're already kind of like leaning towards like having goblins but never really worrying about goblin tribal, then this is actually this is a very reasonable 2-drop, because like Ryan said, there's a lot of times if this is in a cube, I will just draft this because I just need a 2/2 for 2 with some sort of like meaningful upside at a later point in the game, which this card provides. Yeah. This is my second favorite card. The only reason it doesn't get classic for me is because this ability costs 2. It's not going to affect the board other than itself. And the Pack Tactics ability, I would say, is going to be fairly rare that it actually happens. And the way that it kind of is encouraging you to function is to activate the Pack Tactics and then activate the ability. Mm-hmm. But it's also going to make it more difficult to activate it in the first place. So there's a little bit of tension, and you obviously in red, if you are working with a scenario where you have a significant amount of mana available to you, you are probably in the either the dying moments of the game where you're going to win, or the corner is about to get turned on you and you're going to lose. So
right.
I'm talking a lot about a 2/2 for 2. I like this card a lot. It doesn't quite get it for me, but like this is like right on the edge of getting classic for me. I expect it to show up in a lot of cubes, and I would love to see it with more goblins.
Yep, I agree.
Okay. Next one, we'll try to go through this one fast, not just for the flavor. Boots of Speed. This is an equipment for a single red. It equips for 1, and it simply gives equipped creature +1, +0, and haste. This is actually, the rate on this is pretty good.
Yeah.
For giving haste. It costs a single generic mana to equip it. I don't think that this is going to make it into like really powerful cubes, because you really have to be a strong equipment or aura type effect to make it into those. But haste is a very meaningful ability, and to grant a creature haste every turn for a single mana is that's pretty solid. I actually think this is one of the more powerful cards, but it is very simple looking.
Yeah, definitely. Haste comes up in a big way. When it comes to common and cheap equipments, obviously when we get into the higher power cubes, you start looking at stuff like swords of this and that, Umezawa's Jite. So you're not going to be competitive there. So you're more looking at a card like Bone Splitter or some of the living weapon equipment. And haste, that's actually just a huge deal. It's just one of the more powerful keywords in Magic. Mm-hmm. So this is going to come up in a kind of red aggressive deck. Presuming that the creatures that the more creatures don't have haste than do already. That's probably an important thing to double check before you include the card. But assuming you're giving a good volume of creatures haste with this, it looks very solid for something like a Pauper Cube.
This is probably better in a red-green deck than a mono-red deck, because especially at lower rarities, your green creatures are just like the best creatures for their size, and giving those haste is like can be backbreaking in those cubes. So. Yep. Yeah, I like Boots of Speed a lot, actually.
All right. Now we're going to move to something a lot funkier. We have Delina Wild Mage, 3 in a red for a 3/2 legendary Elf Shaman. Whenever Delina Wild Mage attacks, choose target creature you control, then roll a d20. For a 1 to 14, you create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of the chosen creature, except it's not legendary, and it has exile the creature at the end of combat. On a 15 to 20, you choose one of those. You create the token much the same, but then you roll again. So you kind of let it ride. There's a weird combo in this set. There's a creature, there's a blue creature, I forget the name, but it lets you roll 2 dice when you would roll 1. And so you increase your odds, and then you keep rolling more as you copy them, and it gets to a point where you're statistically incredibly likely to keep going. And that card, Delina Wild Mage actually has a day 1 errata. The 15 to 20 ability is you may roll again. You don't actually have to stop you from drawing the game, from having to keep rolling all these dice. At any rate, though, that ability here, this is kind of a cool thing. It's not super likely that you get to keep attacking with your 3/2 and copying things, but you can have a nice swingy effect with 1 attack here. This is going to be another way you can maybe amplify and enter the battlefield, blink kind of theme in your cube. It's a cool one for something a little bit more powered down, or specifically if you're interested in some swingy die roll effects. There's some things to like about this card. Not the most powerful, but it is very cool.
Yeah, I wish it were like a 1/4, just so I could like get the effect more frequently, because I think this is just gonna die in combat like pretty much every time it attacks.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, if you're feeling lucky and you keep hitting 15 or better, this could deal some massive damage. This is a card I would like to see in a cube where it's at appropriate power level. I just think that that's pretty low.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to be up to some pretty specific stuff. But yeah, like you said, probably something pretty low power level.
Yep. All right. This one, I'm getting the much simpler cards, leaving the other ones for Ryan. Next, we have Dragon's Fire. This is an instant for 1 in a red. It says an additional cost. To cast a spell, you may reveal a dragon card from your hand or choose a dragon you control, a la all of the dragons of Tarkir dragony things. So Dragon Fire deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. If you revealed a dragon card or chose a dragon as you cast a spell, Dragon's Fire deals damage equal to the power of that card or creature instead. Now, what I do like about this is that you can go pretty big because dragons happen to be big, but this is just an incinerate variant that does not hit players, which is why it basically can never be custom, because that's essentially a requirement for a 2 mana 3 damage spell.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, if you are supporting dragons in any sort of meaningful way, I think that this is probably a pretty easy inclusion, because it's just a solid removal spell.
Yeah. When Rip Apart was released, some comparisons were made to Dreadbore, which is clearly missing the mark. Dealing 3 damage to a planeswalker, just it's not doing all the work. Let's leave it there. But Dragon's Fire is not necessarily showing up in a cube that's going to have a lot of planeswalkers, but it's more likely that you'll be able to scale it to kill whatever you want to kill until the late game. Totally serviceable removal spell, dragon or no, on turn 2. So a good, like you said, 4 custom cubes. I imagine you're generally going to have a dragon theme. Not a hard requirement for like a pauper cube. It's still as good as a lot of those removal spells, but all the same, I guess you're not really care too much targeting planeswalkers, so it's probably not going to show up in a pauper cube. It would have to be peasant with some of those Worldspark planeswalkers.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, because otherwise you'd have like something like Scorching Dragonfire, which is the same card, but it just exiles instead, which is clearly better.
Right.
So yeah, you do need to have planeswalkers around and also have dragons. But if you do, this card's actually great. Mm-hmm. If you ever deal more than 3 damage, then you're way above rate.
Yeah, for sure. All right, next we got another flashy equipment. Rather, this is an equipment that has flash. It's Dueling Rapier, costs 1 red mana. When it enters the battlefield, attach it to a creature you control, so you get that free attachment. Equip creature gets +2/+0, and it has equip 4. So pretty inefficient to equip. You have to get up to this if you want that kind of +2/+0 combat trick, which lower powered aggressive decks are going to be into that. I think generally this is going to be if your cube somehow cares about artifacts and or specifically equipment, because that equip cost is so steep. Don't let the free equip fool you. But there are things to like about this card.
Yeah, and the equip cost for this card will come up. There's a card, I don't remember the name of it, in Throne of Eldraine that when it enters the battlefield, you cast it for a single green, and it gives equip creature +1/+2, and that was actually a pretty solid card. This doesn't pump your toughness, so it's likely that equip 4 is going to come up. So you need to be prepared in your cube design for that to happen when you're considering this card.
Right.
Okay, so now I have a complicated one.
Nice.
Flame Skull. This is a 3/1 creature skeleton for 1 red. It does have flying, as you would expect from a Flaming Skull, but it cannot block, as you would also expect from a Flaming Skull. And then it has the ability Rejuvenation. When Flame Skull dies, exile it. If you do, exile the top card of your library. Until the end of your next turn, which is very important, you may play one of those cards. So, when this dies, you exile it and the top card, and then from that turn and your next turn, well, until your next turn, you can play one, and then the other one stays exiled forever. So theoretically, you could continue to play Flame Skull back every time that it dies at basically the cost of the top card of your deck, and that's pretty reasonable. And if you hit something that is better than Flame Skull, then you simply get the opportunity to cast that. Now, this seems like a powerful card on its face. I would imagine that a lot of people are going to... This is probably going to be one of the most included red cards in cubes, probably after Plundering Barbarian. And Ryan had initially identified this as custom, and people are probably expecting me to disagree, but I don't. Even though things not being able to block on red cards generally doesn't mean a ton. But a 3/1 with flying for 3 with 1 toughness is not exciting me as I imagine it is exciting a lot of other people. I would probably rather have like a 3. For example, there's a card we're going to talk about in a moment that's just a 3/3 for 3 with haste. I would rather have that card than this card, even though this could theoretically come back.
Yeah, so Flame Skull is incredibly cool. This is another nice D&D reference, but there's just at least one thing off about the card for a classic cube. Maybe that could be you would give it haste. The card suddenly is incredibly powerful if it has haste.
Well, then it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yes. Then it's a slam dunk classic. Yeah.
Right. The use it or lose it nature of Rejuvenation takes some significant points off of this. And the comparison I'm going to draw is to Phoenix of Ash. You lose a point of power there, but that card does have haste, and then you escape it on your own time when you want to. So this card, not being able to block, only attacking for so much, trading with anything that does block it, and then having that limited window to bring it back, especially when your red deck either wants to be kind of just deploying its entire hand or 4 and 5 mana spells, if that's what your deck is up to on subsequent turns. It's just going to compare unfavorably really in every way to Phoenix of Ash. And Phoenix of Ash is not a Legacy Cube caliber card. Very good in Arena Cube, but not quite hitting it there. And for Legacy
okay
Cube,
in Arena Cube.
I like it a lot. I think that's actually a really high pick for me for the red decks, and I know you like the white decks more.
I do, yeah.
And that is totally fair. I rarely don't get 7 wins when I first pick Phoenix of Ash.
That's fair. I mean, it's not that I don't like it. I just think that there's so many cards in that cube for red that are not instants and sorceries, so escaping is difficult.
That's the trick. All your creatures die all the time, so it always comes back. But the point is, Flame Skull is worse than that card.
Yeah, I agree. We can agree on that. Yeah, I think it would be cool in a. So this being a mythic rare is going to scare some people away. But if you have a lower powered cube, I actually think that this is a really cool card. Because that's where it would shine. Because what I'm envisioning is they kill Flame Skull, which is quite easy to do. And then you do the rejuvenation ability, you exile the top card of your deck, and then Flame Skull, and then you're like, well, of course the top card of my deck is better than Flame Skull. And I think in a more powerful cube, that will happen the majority of the time. But in a lower powered cube, when this is more interesting than your Goblin Piker, other card, then I think you have a card that can make some waves for its coolness factor to catch up to its power level.
And there are some skeleton tribal cards. There's an enchantment in this set that cares about skeletons. So that's like something to explore there. Just playing this card as a 3-mana creature, kind of as we established here, it's just not as good as existing options.
Yeah. All right. What do we have next?
Goblin Morningstar, 1 in a red for an equipment. A lot of equipment here. Equipped creature gets +1/+0 and has trample. Equips for 1 in a red. And when Goblin Morningstar enters the battlefield, roll a d20. On a 1 to 9, you create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. On a 10 to 20, same token, attach the Morningstar to it. I think that a lot of people are going to avoid this strictly because not equipping it is so tilting.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think it's actually a really huge difference.
Oh, yeah, it's especially because the equip, like a 2/1 versus a 1/1, that's a big deal in terms of your clock. Equipping for 2 is a steep cost. We've been getting more and more of these equipments that attach immediately, and just rolling that 45%. Even if the card is still playable, if you care about equipment in some capacity, if you care about artifacts in some capacity, it's going to be so frustrating for players because that's just how the human brain works. Basically, anything higher than 50%, people generally think is 100%, or anything lower than 50%, people think is 0% because we have horribly dysfunctional brains. And just a lot of Magic players are not going to be able to deal with rolling the 45%.
Yeah, and I really wanted to talk about this card because I think if you hit 10 plus, I think this card is good. Not like classically good, but for lower powered cubes. And if you do not, then it is not good in any cubes. I wish that like if you rolled the 1 through 9, it gave the creature haste at least. It's like, hey, this isn't quite as good, but here you go. Because then if you have like 4 mana, you can at least equip it and still attack. But alas, it does not. So it is going to feel really, really bad if you do not hit a 10.
Yeah.
And then you're going to be like, why do I have this card in my cube?
The power level is just really not there on the 1 to 9. And I think that mostly this is going to show up in cubes for people that do want a little bit of grief, which is not really my style. But watching your friend roll a 7 and just get visibly upset about it, that can be kind of fun.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and you know what? There's a lot of die rolling in here, and if you're doing the die rolling thing, then I would probably add this card because your cube's going to be on a appropriate power level for it anyway. So. Yep,
exactly.
All right. Next we have Hobgoblin Captain. This is a 3/1 Goblin Barbarian for a 1 and a red, and it has that Pack Tactics ability, which means whenever this creature attacks, if you attack with creatures with total power 6 or greater this turn, or this combat rather, Hobgoblin Captain gains first strike till end of turn. So here we have, again, a Blade Splicer with some medium upside, but you need to attack with 6 power. However, this does provide half of that. So this is going to attack with first strike more frequently than it won't.
Real quick,
I would imagine.
This is the second time you said it, and I was confused the first time. You said Blade Splicer. Do you mean Blade of the Sixth Pride for these 2 mana 3/1s?
I do. I don't know. I literally am picturing it. Yes, Blade Splicer. Jesus. No, I wish it was Blade Splicer. Blade of the Sixth Pride. Yes, is what I mean.
All right.
Thank you for correcting.
Yeah, I didn't think of the card at the top of the show. I was like, that's any creature with 3 power is a Blade Splicer, huh? But okay, I'm there now.
Oh man, it's all right. Hey, I'm gonna say this: Blade of the 6 Pride, and now whoever's editing this podcast can go replace it in the top of the show with me saying Blade of the 6 Pride.
Yeah, good luck, buddy.
There you go. Yeah, that's super not gonna happen.
Anyway, this card directly into Arena Cube. Again, I'm going to play that in all of my red decks with all my mono red shitters. And it is actually really nice because if the nature of the red aggressive deck in your cube is that you just kind of have to alpha for a couple turns and get in a couple points and hope you can cross the finish line. Yeah, when you have the Pack Tactics ability enabled here, the 3/1 having first strike means suddenly it's actually hard to block your best creature. The bad thing that happens when you have to attack with everything is like, okay, I'll block your good creatures and I'll take like 1 or 2 damage, where this will hopefully force an inopportune block on their side of things.
Yeah, first strike is an ability that probably doesn't get enough respect. You know, in cubes that care more about combat, first strike is a extremely powerful ability.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I like this. I mean, this is one of those cards that's like, I'm looking for a 2-drop, and you see this and you're like, yeah, this is fine. I'll take this.
Yep.
Just 3 power, 2 mana with upside. Yeah, sure, I'm in.
Yeah, I mean, I cast Rimrock Knight for 2, just like a lot in Arena Cube. This card is much better.
Yeah, well, it's much better when you cast
casting
it as Rimrock
yes.
Knight.
Right.
Yeah.
Boulder Rush may have something to say about the entire card.
It does, yes. But on turn 2, let me tell you, I'd rather have Hobgoblin Captain.
All right, next we have Hulking Bugbear, 1 red for a 3/3 haste goblin. That's the whole card, but what more do you want? This is an uncommon.
I want an explanation of what a bugbear is.
Bugbear, this is another classic D&D thing. They're kind of like bigger goblins. If you run into a pack of small goblins and you start messing with them, or they're messing with you and you kill them for this transgression, you may run afoul of a bugbear shortly thereafter.
Okay. And this is one of the hulking variety, not a normal bugbear.
Oh yeah, this one is larger than other bugbears even.
Okay. Yeah, this card is quite simple, but quite effective. This is the card I was saying that I would generally rather have than Flame Skull.
Yes. This is another one I'm very happy to have in my Arena Cube decks. If we're talking about enabling aggressive decks in a Peasant Cube, sign me up for this. There already is this exact text box, except it is a what is it? The Gremlins? What was the Kaladesh thing?
It is it's Brazen Scourge, which I believe is a gremlin. Yeah. So this is just better. There's no gremlin tribal. There's certainly goblin tribal.
Yes. Yeah. I would play both if it's just I need a low power card for my aggressive, or a low power, an aggressive card for my low power cube rather. I'd just play both in my deck. But being a goblin, that's going to come up with some stuff. Maybe something like your Battlecry Goblin.
Yeah, there's also I don't remember the name, but there's a werewolf that's like a 3/2 with haste that transforms and does something. Not really relevant, but now there's 3 of these, I guess.
Okay.
3 power haste attackers.
Yeah, if you can be sold on a Bogart Ram Gang, you can really just have 3 power haste tribal.
Yeah, Arnie Broken Bow.
Yeah.
Brow from Kaldheim, I think, is also a 3/3 for 3 with haste.
It is. Yeah, that one is a rare, but again, Arena Cube. I believe that one literally has been featured in the Arena Cube, and it's solid there.
Oh, it definitely has. Yeah. Yep. No one knows what that does, so you can often kill people with that. Okay, so moving along, what do we have next? Oh, yes. This is a very spicy one. Inferno of the Star Mounts. This is a legendary dragon, a 6/6 for 4 red. The classic casting cost for a dragon. The spell cannot be countered, which is good. Has flying and haste, also good. And it has a flavor text ability that is very fun. It has fire breathing, so for a single red, it gets +1/+0 until in turn. And then, actually it says when, which is I really like because it presumes you're certainly going to do this. When the power of this creature becomes 20, deal 20 damage to any target. So, also known as win the game.
I just have a question regarding this card.
Yes.
What did Rorik's Bladewing do to deserve this?
I don't know. One too many pips for Rorik's.
Yeah, this card just had... They bumped off the pip, Rorik's Bladewing. If you're unfamiliar, 3 red. Some of the words in this text box, exactly flying in haste, actually. And then it's
only a 6/5.
It's a 6/5, yes. And I love Rorik's Bladewing. And this card is clearly better, even though one of the abilities is mostly flavor text. And even though Rorik's, I'm going to backpedal a little bit on my anti-pip philosophy, but even though Rorik's costs triple red, I would go out of my way to play Rorik's over this card.
Yeah, I don't think it's bad to say, first of all, that Rorik's is from like 2003, so it gets a little, it's got street cred for being almost 20 years old. So
yeah, put in its time in the pits.
Put in its time
in the pits.
Yeah. That's either way. This is a 6/6 for 6 that can't be countered with flying and haste. This is exactly a card that I would say you'll know when you want this.
Yeah. For me, it's never, but yes, your evaluation of the card absent emotion is accurate. Yes. I just have a personal vendetta.
Yeah, Ryan will never play this over Rorik's Blade.
Not a chance.
It is quite powerful if you are into if you want your curve to go up to 6 mana on red. This is probably one of the best things you can be doing. I would say this is probably a little better than Inferno Titan.
No.
Inferno Titan gets... You don't think so?
No.
It's not nearly as cool, but it's going to kill you.
So I think that can't be countered is a lot weaker than an ability that would stop it from being hit by removal spells. Also, just the Inferno Titan just damaged right away. The fact that it often necrotalls in a big way. Especially if you have just cards that play well with Inferno Titan. I am personally a lot. I maybe value Inferno Titan a lot more than other people. You do get more damage with this card. That does make sense. But I think
that's the thing that I'm mainly interested in.
I think that the red decks that go up to 6 care less about damage. Obviously, you do have to kill your opponent. But my red deck that's trying to cast 6 mana spells is a control deck. Like this card's going to have to block sometimes in the kind of decks that actively want to play it. And that's why I give the nod to Inferno Titan.
Okay. So, one, you're saying if they have a removal spell, you must be forgetting about all of those sorcery speed removal spells, because there's a number of those. And Inferno Titan fares slightly worse than Inferno of Star Mounts, unless they're a creature, they're playing a deck where you can have killed their creatures with your Inferno Titan ability. Either way, I believe that Inferno Titan in more powerful cubes is better, and I think that Inferno of the Star Mounts in less powerful cubes is better.
That's Justin's position. My position, and I know I already stated extreme bias, but
you did.
I prefer Inferno Titan on its merits.
Long-standing prejudice against any dragon that costs 6 mana that's not Rorik's Blade.
Well, this one just having both abilities that Rorik's has, and then just more abilities and being easier to cast. That's upsetting.
Yeah.
Anyway,
well,
now for I think it
is clear. I was gonna say I think it's clear that how Ryan feels and why he feels the way he feels.
To at least me. Next we have Orb of Dragon kind. This card I like a lot if you're trying to do a dragon thing in your cube. It's an artifact for 1 and a red. You can pay 1 and tap it to add 2 mana and any combination of colors. Spend this mana only to cast dragon spells or activate abilities of dragons. You can pay red and tap it and sack it. To look at the top 7 cards of your library, you may veil a dragon card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So I've worked with dragons a bit. They have the problem that they cost a lot of mana. So this is mana acceleration that only casts dragons. If you just put in like signets, people are going to cast whatever the best spell is. They're not going to sign up for dragon tribal if you have like concentrate in your cube. I would rather have concentrate and draw Doomblade than play any number of dragons, right? But this actually says this mana is only for dragons, and then it gives you a reward for signing up to play the dragon tribal, where you have the mana if you need that. That's good early, or you can trade it in for a card late. So this is a really awesome support card for that tribe.
I would implore everyone, make sure that you are adequately supporting dragons if you have this card in your queue. Not only because of its power level when you draft it, but this is a trick if you do not support dragons appropriately. If I see the Orb of Dragon kind in your cube, it might be something in the middle of the pack that I'm like, you know what, maybe I want to draft this, because if you're supporting dragons and doing dragony things, then this is a pretty powerful card. But I don't want to get tricked, so don't trick me. Don't put this in and then have like 5 dragons in your queue.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely get a good clip of dragons, and there's kind of more all the time. You know, if you are trying to support Orb of Dragonkind, I will forgive the inclusion of Inferno of the Star Mounts. You know, make sure you hit your numbers.
I'm just going to move on. Red Dragon, another dragon. This is an uncommon. So this is a 4/4 for 4 red dragon with flying, and when it enters the battlefield, it does fire breath and deals 4 damage to each opponent. This is basically haste and unblockable.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I look at this.
Yeah, I think it was Ari Lax, and I assume it was because Ari just puts out a lot of tweets of this nature where he compared this card to Volcanic Dragon, which is 4 red flying haste.
Yeah.
And he said this card is better, but much less cool. And I agree on both counts.
I agree on both counts as well. Yeah. Volcanic Dragon is the card that I was thinking of, which I've seen in many peasant cubes. So it is less cool. I do think its art is generally better.
Yeah, that art does rule.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we are. This is a pretty simple one to evaluate.
Yeah. if you're in the market for a 6-mana red card in your peasant cube, is basically where I'd put it. And next we have the Rust Monster. 2 in a red for a 2/1 first strike beast. Sacrifice an artifact. Rust Monster gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So card is in some ways similar to Atoc from Antiquities, which is a 1/2 that gets +2/+2 when you sack an artifact. Once you sacrifice an artifact, first strike doesn't really become a relevant part of a lot of combats here, but this one does start with 2 power. So if you're not sacrificing artifacts, you can get some mileage out of it. So you'll get a little bit more value when you're not really shoving with the card. It does cost 1 more mana. Pretty specific context for this one, though.
Yeah. You would need to be in an artifact-centric cube fully.
Mm-hmm.
If you are, then having another Altog-like creature is pretty good. So that's pretty much where I draw the line. If you're in an artifact-centric cube, then this is something I would look at. If you're not, then this is something I'd ignore.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, next up we have Swarming Goblins. This is a 4/3 goblin for 4 in a red. It's a common. When Swarming Goblin enters the battlefield, roll a d20. 1 through 9, create a single 1/1 red goblin token. 10 through 19, create 2 of those tokens, and a 20, create 3 of those tokens. So 50% of the time, this is going to come with 2 tokens. So we were talking about a card earlier. We were talking about Beetleback Chief, which is an uncommon that is a 3/3 for 4 that makes 2 goblin tokens.
The Chief is a 2/2, yeah.
Is it a 2/2?
Pretty confident it's a 2/2.
You're probably right. It probably is a 2/2. Yeah, it's a 2/2. You're right.
This one is a 4/3.
This is a 4/3. Yeah, which is even better. I thought it was a 3/3. And this is a common. At common, this seems like a slam dunk, getting multiple creatures for 5 mana. And a lot of the time, you're going to get 2 creatures, which is quite good. And even at the worst case scenario, it's a 5 mana, essentially a 5/4 split across 2 bodies with upside. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this is an easy inclusion for me and Pauper cubes, and maybe even peasant cubes, depending on what if you're working with tokens or sacrificing themes.
Yeah, if you have those themes, the extra bodies get better. If you have the battle cry goblin, yeah, it's a nice interaction with these cards. This card is just at its floor a lot better than Goblin Morningstar, and you can get that make fun of your friend when they roll a 1 to 9 on a card that's just generally still pretty good to play. Instantly like a Pauper cube.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime you get the 10 to 19, this is a very good return on your mana for those rarity restricted environments.
Yeah. I also like the cards, just as an aside, that have the 20, that you get something extra if you have a 20.
Mm-hmm.
That's just asking for great moments. And this is getting 3 goblins when you roll a 20. That's just sweet.
Yeah, I think that just the moment where you roll the 20 and that third token is the difference maker. That's just such an awesome story.
You're gonna remember that
forever.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, just a great card all around.
All right, next we have Unexpected Windfall, 2 red instant. As an additional cost to cast a spell, discard a card, draw 2 cards, and create 2 treasure tokens. So you see some of these effects, that rummage effect. Getting the 2 treasure tokens, you're paying too much for what you get here. This is just 2 extra mana for what's
Thrill of Possibility.
Thrill of Possibility, thank you.
Yeah.
But then you do get the 2 treasure tokens, and that could be leveraged on a turn where you need to cast 2 or even 3 spells on the same turn, or cast an expensive spell and leave up some interaction with it. This is probably Pauper cube only, but you can get really fancy, and this card probably leads to some pretty cool sequences.
Yeah, generally I want Thrill of Possibility over Unexpected Windfall, just because even though you're getting the 2 mana rebate immediately, and having 2 treasure tokens is generally better than just having 2 of any other mana. But even still, I think I would rather just be able to have the opportunity to cast it for 2. But yeah, there's times that, again, if you are doing an artifact-centric cube, having 2 treasure tokens, 2 artifacts, whatever they do, can be a pretty big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, then this card is significantly better. And you are now able to double up because there's a card from Rivals of Ixalan that's the sorcery speed version of this that costs 3 and a red. And I do not remember the name of the card.
I will say that you probably are going to ask a pretty specific question if you want to look at this card versus Thrill of Possibility. If you want to enable Madness, Discard Matters, even cards in Graveyard, you're probably going to give the nod to Thrill of Possibility. If the idea is you have some amount of 7 mana cards or X spells or even like big flashback costs, and you want to have that show up more often in games, then Unexpected Windfall is a way you can facilitate more of those big plays.
Yep. Well said. Next card we have is Wish. It's a sorcery for 2 and a red, and it's quite simple. You may play a card you own from outside the game this turn. So in Cube, that generally means a card in your sideboard.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an interesting card because this is not a card you just want in like a regular powerful cube, but if you are in a more combo oriented cube, this is a super duper sweet card.
Amusingly, wishes and cards outside the game they're not allowed in Commander Constructed, but that's probably where I think you'd get the most value out of Wish in a cube card. I will also say that Thassa's Oracle has showed up in the Magic Online Vintage Cube, and I've liked having access to that card the most when it was in my sideboard. I don't really like there's the 4 mana Demonic Tutor that can check your sideboard too.
Yeah, Mastermind's Acquisition.
Yeah, and I generally try not to play that card because 4 mana is a lot for a tutor. But access to your sideboard is kind of interesting. Thassa's Oracle didn't really make it into my deck's consistent plans, but I did play a sweet game once where my opponent like Ashiok and exiled most of my ways to win the game, but they also milled me a lot and I acquisition for Thassa's Oracle. So you do generate some really cool moments with access to your sideboard, and Wish can facilitate that. It's kind of weird. You probably have to be a format that you're capable of generating a lot of mana, or specifically combo. Like, I don't know how many Vintage Cube Storm decks this is going to make, but it could lead to some very cool moments in those decks.
Yep. Yeah, probably not many, but this is another great moment card. And to compare to Mastermind's Acquisition, that is 4 mana and 2 pips, and this is 3 mana with 1.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's a different color, it's red. I mean, for the decks we're talking about, I don't think that is going to matter much. So,
right.
Being able to save on mana in a single turn to get your combo card, you know, if that's what you're in for, then this is probably going to be a sweet card for your cube.
For sure. All right, next. You come to the Knoll Camp. 1 in a red, instant. Choose 1. Intimidate them. Up to 2 target creatures can't block this turn, or fend them off. Target creature gets +3/+1 till end of turn. So, those effects where creatures can't block this turn, those are like not quite good enough in the Pauper cubes that I have played, but with the modality here, the +3/+1 to maybe get your way out of a removal spell, survive a combat, or just trade against a larger creature, I think this card does offer you just enough. And I really like a lot of these modal spells for rarity restricted cubes, kind of for that reason. They do like half of a card that you kind of like but wouldn't really play, and give you enough on the other half otherwise.
Yeah, I this is actually maybe my favorite one of those, because this is the most aggressive one by far. Having the +3/+1 is going to kind of be the default mode, but then every once in a while you're going to get the 2 of your creatures can't block, which will generally go on to win you the game. And I like just having a mode that is going to have a really high impact mode right alongside a decent but wouldn't make it on its own mode. And that's what a lot of these cards are offering. And like I said, this is the most aggressive among those.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So the next one is you find some prisoners. 1 in a red for an instant. Choose 1. Break their chains, destroy target artifact, so just a shatter. Or interrogate them. Exile the top 3 cards of target opponent's library. Choose 1 of them until the end of your next turn. You may play that card, and you may spend mana, though, or any color to cast it. So this is kind of, it's either a shatter or an impulse that you have to use within a 2-turn cycle. Getting stuff from your opponent's deck is generally pretty dicey, but like this is another kind of like cool moments card where you steal someone's card and then cast it, and it has the upside of being able to destroy an artifact as it's kind of more default mode.
Mm-hmm.
The thing, this is an uncommon, which I guess is fine. You would not going to include this in a pauper cube where you have only commons. But I don't know. I like being able to have that second ability where you can basically impulse and hopefully get something sweet with the downside of having to destroy an artifact if that's what you're left with.
Yep. Yeah, the interrogate them ability there, that's something that a lot of players really like, that Gonti-esque effect. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're not into the card, I can't convince you to play it. And if you are, I couldn't convince you not to.
Yep. That's appropriate.
All right, next we have you see a pair of goblins. An instant for 2 in a red. Choose 1, charge them. Creatures you control get +2/+0 until end of turn, or befriend them. Create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens. So I love that this is an instant. I could definitely have seen them printing this card as sorcery. So just being able to have flash threats attached, or you have the trumpet blast mode here. It's not powerful enough really to see play, I think, in a non-rarity restricted queue, but I do like this a lot for Peasant. It is an uncommon. I think this card would be incredible in Pauper. I think that it clears the bar for Peasant, but is a little bit worse for that format, but I still like the card quite a lot.
Yeah, if this was a common, I actually think it would be among one of the most powerful 3-drops.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. Clears the bar, most likely. Both of the abilities are solid, and this is going to be fun in regular limited, where you can just get multiple of these and make a couple of goblins and then trumpet them to victory. All right, the last card. Appropriately, I need to make this one a little bit bigger so I can read it. Zerial, Archdruid of Avernus.
Archduke. Show some respect.
Well, if I was reading the card, it would just say Archduck because it cleanly covers the E on the card. Zerial, Archduke of Avernus. This is, of course, a legendary planeswalker Zerial. It has 4 starting loyalty for 4 mana, 2 red, and has the following abilities. +1, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. 0, create a 1/1 red devil creature token with when this creature dies, deals 1 damage to any target. And -6, you get an emblem with, at the end of your first combat phase on your turn, untap target creature you control. Just 1. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. I think, first of all, I like when planeswalkers are not super good. Just for general cube purposes, because then you have a chance to put them in different power levels of cubes. And I think that planeswalkers that are not overpowering are generally fun. And then when you clear that bar and they become very powerful, then they no longer become fun. And this is clearly under the bar of being very powerful. Most of the time, you're just going to put a bunch of devils into play and keep your 4 mana planeswalker around. And when you play a sweet creature with haste, whether you want it to have haste, then you can +1 it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think this is a card that in past years probably would have printed in like a planeswalker deck planeswalker. Maybe a little better than that.
They would have added 2 to the mana cost, but yeah.
Yeah, but the abilities, yeah, you're probably right. Probably would have cost 6.
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about cube and just 4 mana red cards, this is just not going to rank with the best ever printed. It's not going to rank with the second best. Like, Flametongue Kavu has not been good enough for a lot of the higher powered cube for years, but it still shows up. And this card is like not on par with Flametongue Kavu. My attachment to this card, as I mentioned on episode 1, with the D&D campaign that I played over the last year and a half, Descent into Avernus, Zariel was actually the central antagonist of the campaign. So it's really cool for me to see this card. And I don't know, I might try to track down at least a print of this art or try to do something with the card. But that is very cool for me.
The variant art, which is the full art, is very metal. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I have not. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's real metal. That's the best way I could say it. So you just want it, basically, you like this for what it is from a flavor perspective more than its abilities.
Ooh, so I just found that other print. Yeah, that is incredibly metal.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I like it more for flavor than its abilities, and I agree with everything you said, just kind of about planeswalkers being more interesting for cube when they're at a lower power level. Like, I don't think that this would make most of even my arena cube red decks, because even there, I'd probably just rather have a creature with power and toughness. And like Chandra Torch of Defiance is clearly a lot more powerful, and like Hell Rider is on Arena, I'm pretty sure.
It is.
But I think that there's enough stats on this card where it could show up in some kind of cube, and the flavor, the backstory there is enough for me to get excited about that.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I'm sure that there are certainly games where a steady stream of 1/1 devils that die and deal 1 damage or something is just going to completely take over.
Mm-hmm.
Green decks would probably really dislike playing against this card. So yeah, it certainly has some legs. Honestly, this card is probably better than I'm giving it credit for. but it reads kind of boringly to me.
It's firmly in the custom distinction. It's probably showing up in cubes that just would never touch most planeswalkers or even most good 4-mana creatures.
Yeah, that's fair. Maybe if you're doing like one planeswalker per color, but you don't want it to be one of the best cards, then this is an acceptable choice.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Any other red cards? We've talked about most of them.
Yeah, I think that we're doing way more red than green anyway. I think we touched all the stuff I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, same. All right, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, let's check out those green cards.
What's up, gamers? Taking a break from the pod here to talk to you about Star City Games Premium. Now, I know many of you are already Premium members. That's awesome. You're awesome. Thank you for that. If you are not already enrolled in SCG Premium, we need to talk. You are leaving a value on the table for $7.99 a month. You get access to 5% off of Magic Sealed product, 10% off of all Magic singles, 15% off of supplies. Now, I know that I am talking to a lot of Cube owners here. I know that you're going to buy more sleeves. You know you are going to save this money right back on sleeves alone. So that's reason enough for you to enroll. But I am not done yet, not by a long shot. You also get tons of exclusive content from a fantastic stable of writers. We're talking about Jerry Thompson, Paulo Vitor Dama Rosa, Patrick Sullivan, Autumn Burchett, Brad Nelson, Sheldon Memory, Ross Merriam, Todd Anderson, Shaheen Sarani, Michael Majors, Ryan Sachs, Ari Lax, Dominic Harvey, Cedric Phillips. The list goes on and on. My stuff, you can get that every week for free. You're welcome. But now I am asking a favor. Go ahead, get enrolled for SCG Premium. Go to starcitygames.com/join-premium. Sign up today. And let's get back to the podcast.
All right, Adventures in the Forgotten Realm. We are on to green, the monocolored green cards for Cube. Like Ryan said, there's not as many that we have to talk about here as there were for red, but still a decent number. What do we want to start with here?
Well, this is kind of the big thing here is that there's still a decent number, but I'm not seeing any classic cards on the list. So we're gonna jump into custom, and let's start with Circle of Dreams Druid. Green, 2/1 Elf Druid. Tap, add green for each creature you control. Now, I'm a big fan of Rafellos. That costs green. I'm a big fan of Gaia's Dreidel. Taps for green for every creature you control. However, I'm not convinced that this card is more powerful than Llanowar Tribe, which is a green 3/3 that taps for green just all the time.
I am convinced that it's specifically not.
Yeah, it dies easier. It's worse if it's the only creature you control, which is when you need it to be better.
That's exactly. This is like you're wanting to play this early so you can play your bigger stuff. But Llanowar Tribe, 1, I don't think is a great card. Too many pips, as we talk about all the time. I mean, the allure of having a Gaia's Cradle effect is intriguing, but this is on a admittedly fragile body, but if you would have to for this effect. But that kind of matters when you stop needing to make a ton of mana, and then you're just left with a 2/1 that you had to invest probably a whole turn in casting.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think there will ever be a cube I will make that I will put this card in.
Yeah, I certainly am going to stay far away from it. I think I mostly see it as a commander cube kind of card because the ceiling does involve very big plays. That ceiling is kind of, you're only able to realize it in an environment where it's not very hostile to your creatures and you can spend some time setting up.
Yeah. Perhaps. It would need to be a cube where I'm picking out of a larger pack, which would be a commander cube, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The next one is another Circle-y Druid. This is Circle of the Moon Druid. And this is a 2/4 for 3 and a green with the creature types human, elf, druid. and it has the ability Bear Form. As long as it's your turn, Circle of the Moon Druid is a bear with base power and toughness 4/2. So on your turn, it's a 4/2. On your opponent's turn, it's a 2/4. So for 3, the 2/4 and the 4/2 are neither cards that you would put in pretty much any cube. There are multiple examples of each, but being able to play offense and defense is kind of nice. I don't know if this makes it into any cube for me, but maybe I'm being too harsh on it.
Yeah, it's like a Pauper Cube, maybe. Pauper Cube is a spot where your green deck is more likely to be aggressive, just because Pauper Cube often, at least the way I curated mine, heavy on removal to the point where like Llanowar Elves wasn't really a good card to play because it tended to just die, and you would just rather play something for 2 mana that replaced itself in some capacity, to the extent that that's possible. Whereas 2/4 is a little bit more robust. The 4/2 can attack for some damage. Weirdly, sometimes the 2/4 would be better at attacking, so not being able to attack as a 2/4 might cost you sometimes. But I'm sure that this is going to go into some Pauper Cubes.
Yeah, probably. I imagine it would have to be bigger. I agree with that sentiment. I think that I would, I think this would just be better as a 2, like if you could choose. Obviously, it's going to be better if you could choose, but maybe it's still not just good enough because you're forced into those 2 options depending on the turn. All right, what do we have next? Oh, we got a spicy one next.
Eliwick Tumblestrum. 2 green for a Planeswalker Eliwick, 4 loyalty, +1, venture into the dungeon. So you pick one of your 3 dungeon cards and go to the next stage there. -2, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand. If it's legendary, you gain 3 life, put the rest on the bottom in a random order. -7, you get an emblem. With creatures you control, have trample and haste and get +2/+2 for each differently named dungeon you've completed. So much like Zariel, this is a pretty low-powered Planeswalker. If you're able to just control Eliwick over the course of many turns, you can complete a dungeon and get to the more rewarding rooms in a dungeon and do that. Venture is a mechanic that does require, to be particularly effective, does require having a good clip of cards that try to venture so that you can actually get to those later rooms quickly, which is not going to be possible for a lot of cubes. So I think really you kind of have to be in the market for this lower power level Planeswalker. Maybe your cube just has a good amount of legendary creatures, specifically if they're focused into green or the archetypes that your green pairs with in the other colors. Then this 4 mana card that gives you a lot of looks to find your good legendaries, that can be valuable. But again, pretty low power Planeswalker, more cool than good, but certainly very charming.
The most charming thing about the card is not the abilities or the character itself, but that frog on Eliwick's shoulder is the happiest creature I've ever seen in my life. I can only hope to achieve whatever happiness it is feeling at the moment that this image was captured of its existence.
That frog is having a great time.
It's having just a blast. Okay, going on, we have help me out on the name of this one, Ryan.
Elterguard.
Elterguard Ranger. This is a 4/1 human elf ranger for 4 and a green with reach, and when it enters the battlefield, create a 2/2 green wolf creature token. This is one that for a pauper cube, making 2 creatures across, or making 6 power across 2 bodies for 5 mana is pretty good, and is going to be pretty good 100% of the time. Even though a lot of green creatures are, as we will talk about a little bit later, are more card advantage focused with actually drawing cards, generally they're just drawing you more creatures, so this is kind of doing the thing for you. And there's going to be some number of peasant cubes where you would want this too if you care more about perhaps a token theme, because this is going to bring along a decently sized token. A 2/2 is a pretty good sized token in most cubes. So slam dunk for pauper, and then for peasant, maybe depending on what you got going on at 5 mana or your themes.
So while you were talking about it, I was reading the flavor text for the card, and Elterguard is from the city of El Turel. That was actually a city that was a central focus of the Descent into Avernus campaign. It was
Nice.
was a city that was dragged into the 9 hells. So that's another cool evocative thing to me. Probably a lot cheaper to get an artist print of that one, but
Yeah, I would bet so. I would bet so. Yeah, but not nearly as metal.
Right. Our next card is Frog Hemoth. 3 green for a 4/4 frog horror with trample and haste. Whenever Frog Hemoth deals combat damage to a player, exile up to that many target cards from their graveyard. Put a +1/+1 counter on Frog Hemoth for each creature card exiled this way. You gain 1 life for each non-creature card exiled this way. So, I mean, giant frog hoarder. This card, again, more cool than good. 5 mana, 4/4 trample haste. Those are decent stats, but they're not competitive with the best cards of all time. So
No.
you probably are going to be putting this card in your cube if you really like the frog horror and you're lower power, non-rarity restricted.
Maybe you found that Questing Beast is a little bit too powerful and you'd like to tone it down a little bit. So Frog Hemoth might be up your alley.
Yeah, or
I like
tone it down a lot.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, taking any Throne of Eldraine card. But I like for lower powered cubes, a big 4/4 trampling haster with some upside on abilities. Yeah, I'm into this for those. This isn't going to make any sort of powerful cubes, but like this is a card that I feel like if I see in a pack, and I'm interested in having a 5-drop and I don't have anything going on there, I would happily take this.
It is nice that after the first hit, it's probably a very real threat on future turns. So
yeah,
spend your time trying to clear the path for just 1 hit, and suddenly it's a lot easier on subsequent turns.
Exactly. Yeah, I do actually like this card. It certainly doesn't get the classic designation. Just too much mana for the effect, but trample and haste on a 4/4 is pretty nice. Right. So I'm into that for 5 mana. I would say if this was in a cube, I would probably draft it more often than I would not. It's just going to be hard to make the list in the first place.
I would at least chide other people for not drafting it.
Oh, you're going to pass the frog war? Yeah, don't do that. Okay, so next we have Long Rest. This is a sorcery for X green. Return X target cards with different mana values from your graveyard to your hand. If 8 or more cards were returned to your hand this way, your life total becomes equal to your starting life total. Exile Long Rest. This has commander or multiplayer cube written all over it. Not really anywhere else, but this is very similar to like a Seasons Past, but you need a lot more mana to do it to get the full effect. But even if you do, going back to your full life total, especially if it's 40, is pretty sweet in those situations.
Definitely. Great flavor on this one. Going to your starting life total on a Long Rest. That's a big part of D&D. It being X equals 8. Long rests are 8 hours. I do love that.
Oh, very nice. I didn't realize that part.
But yeah, just kind of inefficient. Get cards back from your graveyard. Like you said, this is mostly a commander cube kind of thing. All right, next we have Lurking Roper. 2 and a green for a 4/5 horror. Lurking Roper doesn't untap during your untap step, but whenever you gain life, you do untap it. So this is that card that kind of allows you to race your opponent in life gain deck. We've talked about this previously on the podcast, where you can gain as much life as you want outside of specific rule setting cards. You're not going to life gain me to death. This one actually puts pressure on your opponent to do something about it, which is solid. 3 mana 4/5. That's good. It's not the most powerful card. Like, it's just kind of worse than playing Lovestruck Beast. However, most cubes that have a life gain theme are not playing cards as powerful as Lovestruck Beast.
Yeah, maybe if you don't want to, if you're not interested in Throne of Eldraine, replace questing beast and lovestruck beast with frog hemoth and lurking roper.
Hey, you gain your life on the frog hemoth, untap
That's
the
a combo.
lurking roper, boom.
Yeah. In reality, 4/5 is pretty big. A 4/5 is pretty big. If you are doing a life gain theme, generally you are playing not a super powerful cube, because the payoffs are generally not there.
Mhm.
So if you have like a mid-range power cube and you're trying to push life gain, I think this is actually a decent creature. It doesn't come into play tapped, which is really important.
Mhm.
So you only have to trigger it. It's not like Traxos where it comes into play tapped and then you have to play something to untap it and do that sort of nonsense. The first attack is free and then you got to start gaining life from there.
Yep.
Okay, moving on. Neverwinter Dryad. I just really like this name for some reason. Neverwinter. I don't know. That sounds nice to me.
Yeah, it's cool.
I don't know if it means anything, but I like it. It is a 1/1 for 1 creature Dryad with the ability pay 2 generic mana, sacrifice Neverwinter Dryad, search your library for a basic forest card, put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. This is certainly not Sakura Tribuilder, but not many things are. You can play it on 1 and then curve into it on 2. It's like a reverse the elk that's a 2/2 that you pay for 2 and then you pay 1 to sacrifice it.
Oh yeah, Dawn Treader elk, is that the one? Is it a different elk?
Yes, that's the one, I think. Yeah, I believe that's the one. So it's like a reverse of that card where curve's much better because you can activate the ability on 2. Maybe if you are interested in doing a lot of creature oriented ramp in your cube, then this is something more interesting than a rampant growth or a Into the North or friends of that nature.
Yeah, the deck that comes to mind, it's another deck that really incentivizes Sakura Tribuilder, but if you want to get up to spider spawning, and I know you do because everyone does, this is the kind of creature that does kind of make sense there.
There you go. Yep. Ramps, put a body in the graveyard.
All right, next we have Old Gnawbone. 5 green, 7/7 legendary dragon with flying. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, create that many treasure tokens. So this has to be I can feel David McDarby's influence on this card. It was like, I have 7 mana and a 7/7, but you know what I really need is more mana.
More mana. That's exactly right. I'm thinking, like, what do you have? You've just played your 7/7 flying dragon. Now what do you need beyond this?
Exactly. So, I mean, I expect to see this in the Live the Dream cube if that comes back to Magic Online.
Sure.
I expect to see this in the Chromatic cube and Magic Arena if we revisit that. For the most part, this is going to be Commander cube kind of thing. Yeah, Old Gnawbone. I mean, I guess 7 mana, 7/7 flyer. Like, those are solid stats. Green doesn't get a lot of flying. Yeah. And if you're doing Dragon Tribal and you have like a combination of things where you kind of want dragons in every color and you want your green to have a bigger thing, there's only so many green cards that really make sense in that environment. Like a lot of the green 7 mana cards are just going to validate the dragon. So I can definitely see this if that's what you're getting up to.
Yeah, like you said, the stats are they're not bad. I mean, 7/7 for 7 with flying. I mean, that will kill you. Will kill someone. But I mean, I can't envision myself ever putting this in any sort of cube. It's a mythic rare, which is pretty limiting. So I don't know where this would make it in unless I just wanted to play with it specifically, which is how it's going to make it into the 2 cubes you mentioned.
That's what cube's about, baby.
It is. You know what I'm about? I'm about Owlbear. We were talking earlier about pauper and peasant cubes and how card advantage is paramount. Well, if you want to talk about like a massive, huge staple of this format going forward, you have Owlbear, a 4/4 for 4, or excuse me, a 4/4 for 3 green for 5. It is a bird bear, as you would imagine, and it has trample. and it has the ability Keen Senses. When Owlbear enters the battlefield, draw a card. Kavu Climber was pretty good. Was plenty good.
I was just gonna say you have no idea how many Kavu Climbers I've cast.
I've cast a lot of Kavu Climbers as well. I've cast Kavu Climber in Invasion Limited.
Nice.
So, Paper Invasion Limited too. This is not Magic the Gathering Online Invasion Limited. So Owlbear, I mean, if you're playing a Pauper Cube and you don't want Owlbear, it would only be for power level reasons.
Yeah. You don't want the Owlbear deck to dominate the metagame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is going to make it in every Pauper Cube and pretty much every Peasant Cube. I would like to see a cube where this is, you don't want this in those two.
Pretty open and shut there. Our next card is Prosperous Innkeeper, 1 and a green, 1/1 halfling citizen. When Prosperous Innkeeper enters the battlefield, create a treasure token, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. So this is another card for the life gain deck, and this is another card that gives an incidental treasure token, and you got support for a specific theme and a nice little payoff there. Wiley Goblin is a card that is like kind of close. And the big reason that I just never really have tried to incorporate it is it costs double red. This card being 1 and a green. You know, halfling citizen, less useful creature types than goblins. However, I think that this card is going to show up in some cubes and be pretty significant.
Yeah. I mean, the cost is right. It provides a non-irrelevant ability that triggers on a pretty frequent basis. So it's got a lot of little parts going for it. And ultimately, in cubes where you care about one of the ones a decent amount and the other ability a little bit, it'll probably make it in those cubes.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine they're you know, I don't want to say few and far between, but again, generally if you're doing life gainy stuff, it's going to be a lower powered cube. But this is a green version of a Soul Warden type effect that provides some other utilities. So yeah, not too bad.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, we have Purple Worm. Just a purple worm. And this is worm with an O, not a worm with a U. Mm-hmm. I want to clarify that.
Yeah, that's messed up.
This is an 8/7 creature worm with an O for 5 green, but this spell costs 2 less to cast if a creature died this turn, which would make it 5 green. It also has Ward 2, which is basically Frost Titan ability. Let me tell you, if you could cast this for 5 green, you will win many of those games, especially if it is on turn 5.
Yeah, for 3 green, it was reduced.
Yes, sorry. If you can cast this for 5 total, being 3 green, you're going to win a lot of those games, especially if it's on curve.
Yeah, for sure. And green decks do a solid job of putting you in that spot where you'll have cast some creature on your turn 4, and you know we don't like using removals at sorcery speed. So on your turn, it's like, okay, well, you know, now I'll kill that. And you're like, gotcha. Here's the worm. I imagine that's going to be a pretty common play pattern for the peasant cubes that this card shows up in.
Yeah, I really just like being able to aggressively just push with all of my creatures on turn 5, and knowing even if they get a good block, and I'm putting asterisks around that the 2 mana discount will more than make up for it.
Yep,
it's just a massive deal. This thing is just huge.
Oh,
it doesn't have trample, fortunately, but it's just monstrous.
Right. Solid for those. And our next card is Ranger Class. This is another class enchantment for 1 and a green. When Ranger Class enters the battlefield, create a 2/2 green wolf creature token. You go to level 2 for 1 and a green. Whenever you attack, put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature. And then for 3 and a green, you go to level 3. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast creature spells from the top of your library. So you have a 2 mana 2/2 wolf. That's what you get immediately. So already those stats are reasonable. This card is a rare. I think these abilities, this card will be like incredibly good. Probably way too good to print for regular booster drafts at Uncommon. But it is kind of in the spot where this isn't going to make a ton of non-rarity restricted cube, but if your cube is really about a lot of combat, and specifically for that reason, your green column looks a lot different from other cubes where you don't so much have mana dorks. Instead, you have creatures that care about attacking and blocking. Suddenly, this card becomes very attractive.
Yeah, I think this is the best green card in this set. The best green spell in this set, I'll say.
Yeah, I can see it.
I think this is still custom, but it's the closest to classic for me. It's not going to ultimately fit in all classic cubes because you're still just playing a grizzly bear with upside that you got to put mana into. Upside is not game altering to a significant enough degree that it's going to fit into a lot of higher powered cubes, but it does provide a good rate on the body, which is a 2/2 for 2. Both of the abilities for level 2 and level 3 are relevant. The level 2 ability, if you are doing +1/+1 counter theme in your cube, this is probably a card I would definitely put in because it's providing a bonus for that theme with giving +1/+1 counters, but it's divorced from the creature it comes into play with. A lot of times when you have those two type effects, it's that effect on a creature that you're saying like, oh, when I attack, I get a bonus. And I actually think in this case, it's better that it makes the token, obviously, because if the token dies, you still have that ability. And of course, when you get to the level 3, which takes another 4 mana, then you have a Vizier of Many Faces. Is that the
Menagerie?
The Menagerie, Many Faces. I don't even know where I got that from.
You got it from a blue clone with the Eternal Eyes.
Ooh, which is also from Amonkhet. Okay, good. Vizier of the Menagerie, which again, divorcing the ability from the creature, I think is better in that case. If you're in a cube that cares about attrition and like grinding the games out, which a lot of people happen to like, if you're in a Jundi cube, I think this card is very good. If you are in a cube that is trying to just play the purely most efficient cards, that's where this misses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could definitely see this being a significant card for like proliferate cube.
Yeah. If you care about +1/+1 counters, I would add this.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty. That one's pretty simple for me. Okay, moving on, we have a more interesting card, and that is Silvery Moon, not Silver Moon, Silvery Moon. Okay, so not exactly silver. It's maybe a hint of silver. Silvery Moon Ranger. It is a 3/3 for 1 green legendary creature, human elf ranger. It has reach and ward 1. And whenever you cast a creature or planeswalker spell, venture into the dungeon. And then it has my least favorite line of text on this entire set. This ability triggers only once each turn. Whenever you complete a dungeon, create a green 2/2 wolf creature token. Now, this is one of the better dungeon venturing cards, even though it has that stupid once a turn line of text, which I don't know why it does. Anyway, it is a 3/3 with multiple relevant abilities for 3, just straight away. You have to be doing more venturing into the dungeon. If you're just doing this on its own, it's probably not good enough. But if I was doing any single one card that had venture into the dungeon out of this entire set, it wasn't going to include any of the rest, this would be the one that I would pick.
Yeah, I agree. It's got decent stats for the cost. Ward is also pretty nice there. That trigger once a turn, that's got to be a limited balance thing for this specific card. I guess you could make a flavorful argument because you can only move so far in Dungeons and Dragons or whatever, but I don't know. I don't love that part of the card, but this is a cool card, and another one where if you're trying to get green more into a beatdowny role, I think that this can show up in your cube and be a pretty nice tool for those decks.
Yeah, It's got a lot of good stats. It's got a lot of things going on. It's just gonna be a while before you make a 2/2 wolf, which is my problem.
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't really make it. It doesn't really make it for me. I would have to be doing more venturing into the dungeon. If I did, then I'd be super interested in this card. But otherwise, I'm probably gonna pass.
Yeah. Human and elf are both intriguing types. There's a little bit more going on there. But yeah, venturing at most once a turn is not the biggest payoff. All right.
Not about it.
Next we have Werewolf Pack Leader. Green 3/3 human werewolf. Pack tactics. Whenever a werewolf pack leader attacks, you attack with creatures with total power 6 or greater this combat, draw a card. 3 to green. Until end of turn, a werewolf pack leader has base power and toughness 5/3, gains trample, and isn't human. Hate the pips.
Yep.
I like that it's a human. However, the pips are such a non-starter for me, and the fact that this card, I guess it kind of does something that plays well with Innistrad werewolves, because if you spend 4 mana on that +2/+0 ability, which is largely what that boils down to, then you're not casting a spell and you could like transform something. But kind of a miss for me in terms of magic. You know, you are changing shape there, so that's evocative of a D&D werewolf.
It does lose its humanness as well.
Yeah, exactly. But just the double pips and just not really making a ton of sense with Innistrad werewolves. And for a 2-mana 3/3, I think you do have to be double green. This is a card that I feel like if anybody was going to like it, I should be that person, and it doesn't hit for me.
Ryan, known lover of pips, so you know if he doesn't like it. Look, you were talking about Meteor Swarm. You started the show off with Meteor Swarm today.
I did.
Which has the most pips of any card that we've talked about.
There's some ties.
Yeah. Anyway, I agree with you. I would be all over this card if it cost 1 and a green. It's pretty that simple.
Yeah, and like if they made it worse and it cost 1 and a green, I would be all over it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, getting halfway there to pack tactics, like we talked about with a couple of the other cards, like the percentage of that ability that the creature on its own is triggering is a relevant factor. Half is a pretty good rate. So basically you just need to attack with, in a lot of cases, one other creature to draw a card, and that's pretty powerful. But green means I'm not casting this on time most often, and that kind of kills it for me, because we're not to the point yet where I believe you can meaningfully have a mono green section in your cube that isn't about playing Landwar Elf and friends. So
you know where this is
maybe
good,
once
though?
we get there. Maybe once we get there.
You know where this is good though is
I do not.
It's
standard.
The leatherback Baloth cube.
Oh yes, the leatherback. Oh man, what a curve that is. Leatherback. Oh, can you imagine? Pelt collector into or not pelt collector? Is it pelt collector?
That's one of them. One mana,
pelt collector into werewolf pack leader into leatherback Baloth. That is
go off.
You're doing it. You're doing it then. Yeah. You got to have those exact 3 cards, but you are doing it if you can do it.
And 3 basic forests, but
and 3 basic forests. Okay. So next up, we have another you happen on a glade. This is an instant for 2 and a green. Choose 1, journey on. Search your library for up to 2 basic lands, reveal them, put them into your hand, and shuffle. Or make camp, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. This card is great.
Yeah.
This card's, I mean, I don't care if look, divination's divination. I draw 2 lands off of divination plenty of time when I'm not expecting to. And this also can just be an instant speed regrowth. Yeah, I'm super in for this card.
Yeah. Yes, really nice utility there. It is an uncommon. I think this would just like go easily into every pauper cube, and it's certainly good enough for at least most peasant cubes. Yeah,
I think it's going to go into every peasant cube.
Yeah.
It's 2 basic lands. Like, you don't even have to get forests.
True. Yeah, it fixes your mana, which is nice.
Yeah. And then it has the additional ability of, if you're not interested, if you draw it early, it's fixing your mana you're still drawing to, and if you draw it late, it's a regrowth. Instant speed at that. Yeah, I think this card is great. I think this card is going to make it into a lot of rare cubes. Not the most powerful ones, just because you're competing with just more efficient cards that do both of those things. So it can't win those battles, but in a lot of cases, I think this card is still just pretty good.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then lastly, we have You Meet in a Tavern. 2 green sorcery. Choose one. Form a party. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal any number of creature cards from among them and put them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Or start a brawl. Creatures you control get +2/+2 until end of turn. So you have Lead the Stampede, except it costs an additional green mana to form a party. Or stapled on, you have... there's definitely a white card that just +2/+2 is your team. Whatever that is. But you have this potential card advantage spell. It's going to be really good in your creature-heavy deck. Or the other side of it, you pump your creatures, which tends to be really good in decks that are full up on creatures. Now, you are paying a lot for this effect. We're talking about high-powered cubes at 4 mana. You're competing with like Garruk Wildspeaker and a lot of much more powerful cards. But for a lower power cube, or if you're a rarity-restricted cube that's really heavy on creatures, which is often the case for the green column, I think there's a very real argument for this card.
Yeah. This is both of these 2 choice cards in green are quite powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say they're among the most powerful ones of all of the ones that we've talked about from just a raw power level perspective. They're more expensive, but you're making up for it with the choices they're given.
Yes. Yeah, just really good modes there.
Yep. Yeah, totally agree. That was the last one. Our last green card. Ryan, anything else on green before we move on to the rest of the stuff?
Yeah, unfortunately for green, all custom cards, some close calls on classic.
Yeah.
But we do have some more classic cards coming up later. But yeah, that's all I got on green.
Okay. Yeah. Me as well. In that case, we're going to take our last break. And when we come back, we're going to finish off Venture in the Forgotten Realms.
Hello there from Dominario's Judgment, a weekly podcast for Star City Games with me, Dom Harvey.
And me, Ari Lex.
Where we bring you the latest, greatest, and downright weirdest things Modern has to offer.
Want to know what to expect for next weekend's events? We've got you covered.
Do you want deep breakdowns of the hot topics and decks in Modern? We've got you covered.
Just want to make sure you don't miss the latest nonsense before your opponents teach you a lesson about it in the queues? Oh yeah, we have definitely got you covered.
And when Modern Horizons 2 blows the ceiling off this format, as it surely will, we'll be here with you to pick up the pieces.
Find us every week on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Or if you want to head over to StarCityGames.com, we'll be right there alongside all the great content from all your other favorite content producers.
All right, Ryan. Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. Let's start with our little potpourri section for multicolored.
Yeah, so multicolored cards, much like green, these are all custom. There's one that deserves an asterisk here. We'll get to that. It's not Adult Gold Dragon, but that's our first card. So Adult Gold Dragon, 3 red white, 4/3 dragon, flying, lifelink, haste. This card is like bonkers in booster draft. Like all these abilities stapled together.
Yeah, it is.
I understand how like you can draw a negative comparison to Thunder Maw Hellkite and Glorybringer and a number of 5 mana dragons, even monocolor options that exist, but like the combination of lifelink and haste and then also having evasion, like these keywords are all so good that this is going into more of a powered down cube if it shows up in your cube, but it's probably a huge beating in the cubes that it does see play in.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. This is like this card has such a hard line on it. Like this card is either not good enough at all, and it's going to be picked very low, or it's going to be just a monster of like a game swinging monster.
Mhm.
If you can't kill it immediately. It's 3 of like the 4 best abilities you can put on a creature. The other one being like flash. But yeah, this card is it's so weird. This is the dragon that would benefit the most from having 4 toughness, which is exactly why it doesn't have it.
Right.
If this was a 4/4, I would actually feel differently, because then it takes a different class of cards to kill it, but everything in cube deals 3, which is fortunately good, because if you can't kill this after like 2 attacks, then you're just probably not going to win the game anyway. Yeah, I in lower powered cubes, I don't know. I don't know if I would want this card to be good.
Yeah, that
is
is
kind of the thing.
Definitely
That's
an
the
interesting
question,
conversation.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about cube is the well is so deep. You know, the more specific, like when people try to make statements about cube broadly, that's like a pet peeve of mine. Where like, yeah, I just said off the top of my head, let's say that your cube is, you have a design constraint, you only like French vanilla creatures, like abilities that aren't just static keyworded abilities are not allowed in your cube. Suddenly, like, this is a really cool card to highlight in that environment. And yeah, that's something that might exist, might not, but I was at least able to like come up with that off the top of my head. And like, yeah, maybe somebody just heard that idea for the first time. They're like, whoa, that actually sounds really cool to me. You know, and that's a great thing about
that's actually a good. Yeah, I think that's actually a good example.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is I would want to, if you're interested in this effect, and red and white is something that doesn't often skew to 5 mana. So there's some consideration there where it's offering a cube appropriate power level card that's a red and white card that doesn't cost like 1, 2, or 3 and isn't about like trying to efficiently kill your opponent as quickly as you can. So I think there's some little bit of legs to that, but the effects that this card is bringing and the game swinging ability is potentially scary if you're in a lower powered cubes, because this could just be one of the most hated cards for any time it shows up across the table.
Yeah, I'm sure that people are already sick of this card in Booster Draft.
Yeah, probably so. I've not had the opportunity to play with or against it, but rest assured it is coming. All right, the next card. Okay, I'm going to give this a shot for pronunciation. Drizzt? Is that so far so good?
That'll work.
Drizzt Duerden?
Yeah. Yeah, that'll get you a passing grade.
Okay, all right, I'll take it. Drizzt Duerden, a 3/3 Elf Ranger for 3 green and white. It has double strike. When this creature enters the battlefield,
about to get tougher.
Oh no, I fooled myself. I didn't know this one. Create Goonwavar.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
Guavar, a legendary 4/1 green cat creature token with trample. Whenever a creature dies, if it had power greater than Drizzt's power, put a number of +1/+1 counters on Drizzt equal to the difference. So it's giving you a 4/1 with trample, and then when that dies, this would get a +1/+1 counter. However, it doesn't care what dies, just that it has more power, and then it will make up the difference. I like this card theoretically, other than having to pronounce any words on it. But outside of that, it's giving you a 3/3 double strike and a 4/1 with trample for 5 mana. I mean, it's not a bad deal. You know, it's not a Tristani Discordant, but this is provides a nice spread of power and toughness in a single card for 5 mana.
Yep. Like you said, it's not on the level of Tristani's Discordant. It's not generally on the level of War of the Spark, Tulsimer, Friend of Wolves, I think is the superlative.
Yeah, I think that's a better example.
Yeah.
Closer there.
But this card is like a big D&D reference. I imagine that's where it's going to show up, is just the nostalgia, the emotional resonance there. Yeah, it's a cool enough card. Does some solid things, but custom for sure.
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
All right, now we are at my card with the asterisks. Mink's Beloved Ranger. Cost Naya, red, green, white. 3/3 legendary human ranger. When Mink's Beloved Ranger enters the battlefield, create Boo, a legendary 1/1 red hamster creature token with trample and haste. And then for X mana, until end of turn, target creature you control has base power and toughness XX and becomes a giant in addition to its other types. You can only activate that as a sorcery, so it's not going to be a huge combat blowout. But this does come with the 1/1 trampling token. You have a mana sink there. Also, if you want to get creative, you can pay 0 and this becomes a sacrifice outlet. So with the threaten effect, or for some reason you have like Naya, maybe a 4-color sacrifice deck. But the reason,
as you do.
Yeah, exactly. The reason I have the asterisks here is this is not going to generally show up in classically powerful cube unless you have kind of a balance or color balance and a symmetrical idea in mind where you've talked yourself into one 3-color card for every pair. This is probably, and it's not generally a competitive slot, this is probably where all of those cubes are going to go for their Naya card.
I agree with that. Specifically that sentiment. I think this is the best exactly Naya mana cost card.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not a lot of competition. Maybe you were really inspired by our Leatherback Baloth conversation. You're like, well, I'm a big Woolly Thokdar fan. But otherwise, this is probably the best Naya mana cost card by a pretty decent margin.
Mm-hmm. It's a human too. That matters in some of these cubes.
Yeah, and it comes. I mean, it gives you a raging goblin at worst, right off the bat, which is it's not terrible with a non-flavor text ability. So yeah, sure. I don't know if I'm into to Naya mana costing cards, but if I were, this would be the one.
Yeah, this one is going in Spooky Cube, replacing the much maligned Naya Charm.
Yeah, Naya Charm. Let me see if I can get all the modes on Naya Charm. 3 damage to target creature.
Yep.
Return target. I'm gonna say no. I don't think they did permanent then. I'm just gonna say return target card, just regrowth.
I'm pretty sure that's correct.
And then, of course, the cryptic command mode, which is tap all of your opponent's creatures.
Yep. Yeah.
Target opponent's creatures.
You got it.
Okay.
I did one time. I do like to kind of push the limits of what's possible, definitely within my own cubes. And one time I decided it wasn't a total waste of my evening to draft Naya spells. So my deck was like Young Pyromancer, Quirion Dryad, and just like 20 playables and trying to figure out 3 additional cards with my Naya Charm and Naya Spells deck. And it would have been really cool if I could win a game, but I could not. So it was not very cool.
If only you had Dragon Scale Elite.
Yeah, Dragon Scale Elite. Dragon Rage Channeler would have helped a lot.
Oh yeah. Maybe now was the time for Naya spells.
Yeah, I'll give Naya
to
Charm
as a preeminent cube archetype.
Give Naya Charm one last ride with the new tools.
Yeah. Now is its time. Power levels finally caught up to Naya Charm. All right. Next up, we have Monk class. So this is an enchantment class for a white and a blue. And level 1, which it starts with, the second spell you cast each turn costs 1 less to cast. Exactly the second. Not the third, not the fourth, the second one. So don't you go casting more than 2 spells. Level 2, for a white and a blue. When this class becomes level 2, return up to 1 target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Level 3. This is a generic mana, a white and a blue. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library for as long as that card remains exiled. You may cast this card as long as you've cast another spell this turn. And of course, if you've cast another spell, it's your second one, it's going to cost 1 less.
Boom.
Now, there's a lot of pips on this card, so you know Ryan has selected this to add to the list.
Yeah, it's 2 different colors, though, so it's fine.
No, in all seriousness, I like all of the effects independently, but it's a long ways to get to them. Because I think you need to get to level 3 for this to be probably good enough. But it is really good at level 3.
Yeah, you're like paying a lot for just a bounce spell in the first 2 modes. And where this is really going to show up, I like cubes that really restrict access to card advantage, but you still want some of it because in general, at least for me, games become unexciting in the other direction where players just like run out and then there's just like more turns where it's like you top deck a land and nothing's happening in the game. So I like restricting access to card advantage, but then having some ways you have to be a little bit more invested to get it. And that's where this card actually becomes pretty interesting to me. Is if you're not playing any fact or fictions or compulsive research caliber cards, and the queue is probably more about combat, then a card like this actually gets really appealing as a way to actually go over the top in the games.
Yeah, I think this is definitely you need the sum of all of its parts to have this card function in a powerful way, but if you can, it is actually quite powerful. Mm-hmm. Because notably on the level 3, you get to do this every upkeep, and it just stays exiled, and you can always cast it as long as you've cast any other spell this turn. So if you don't cast it the first turn, it still just hangs around, like it doesn't go anywhere. It's not a red card, so it's not limited to just this turn or your next turn. It just stays permanently. And once you actually start doing like getting the card advantage plus the cost reducing, then it actually, I think it starts becoming like a runaway card pretty quickly. Yep. Yeah, pretty quickly after you spent a lot of time with it. But your point is taken. Investment, once you've spent 7 mana over 3 turns. Yeah, investment is cool. You got to get paid off for your investment, and I think this card hits a lot of good notes and that kind of thing. Yep. Okay, I'll agree with that. Yeah, I'm for it. All right. Next, we have Orcus, Prince of Undeath. Cost X, 2 black, red, 5/3 legendary demon with flying and trample. When Orcus, Prince of Undeath, enters the battlefield, choose 1. Each other creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. You lose X life. Return up to X target creature cards with total mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. They gain haste until end of turn. So, I mean, 4 mana, 5/3 flying trample is like fine. This is really not going to make it into any high powered cube because that's definitely below rate of some of the other options for that cost, and even some cards a little bit cheaper than that cost. But yeah, you do have some cool effects. I think mostly we're talking about like a commander cube for a card like this. Yeah, I think you're in a cube where you can scale that X. This is going to be a pretty sweet card. Mm-hmm. And I think really, if you're looking at your cube and you're like, the games generally go to like 8 and 9 mana, regardless of the kind of cube that is, then this is a card that is probably a very cool card. And if it's like, no, the games end at 5 or 6 mana or less, then this is going to not make a deck and not get cast pretty much any time. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a pretty easy designation. Yeah, and also if like you just have an aversion to sweepers, which is something that I'm generally a fan of, just not having too many sweepers, that games are about creatures and tactical positioning on the battlefield instead of just like hate cards. This is a sweeper that, you do have a payoff attached. Like there's a creature here, but it does cost a lot of life and a lot of mana to actually get a meaningful sweeper. Yeah, but then if you can sweep the board and you're left with a 5/3 trample flyer, that's pretty good. going to be worth the price of investment if that's something that you're able to do in a cube, if you can get up to enough mana to make it relevant.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next, we have another class, and this one's very cool. Sorcerer class. This is a enchantment class for a blue and a red, and of course, level 1. When Sorcerer class enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards. We all know Ryan loves an Is It Charm. Level 2, you have to pay a red and a blue, and this is one of my favorite abilities on any of these class cards. Creatures you control have tap at a blue or a red mana. Spend this mana only to cast an instant or sorcery or to gain a class level. I really like that part because otherwise this card would be incredibly difficult to get to level 3, which is when you are, for the most part, the reason you are playing this card.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like that it gives all of your creatures the ability to tap for a red and a blue to cast instants and sorceries because, of course, it's for a sorcerer. And if you're in like a blue-red spell slingy type deck, this is something you want to do anyway. So far, so good. And then level 3 for 3 blue-red. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, that spell deals damage to each opponent equal to the number of instant and sorcery spells you've cast this turn. So it encourages you to cast as many small instants of sorceries as possible, but then it can build to a pretty meaningful amount of damage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the major strike I have for this card is that it's a rare. I think that you would get really cool decks with this
Just
card
put it in there.
in a peasant cube.
Just put it in there.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, the power level isn't suggesting this is a rare power level. It's just a rare because of the type of effect that it does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, it's not like this is too good for an uncommon cube.
Yeah, it does some sweet things there. Yeah, this is not on the level for a vintage cube storm deck.
No,
but
not nearly. It's just such a cool card, though.
Yeah, you can make really cool turns, and in any cube that's trying to make this card work, I'm about it.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with that. Yeah, this is one I advocate for bending rarity rules if it makes sense, and this is like the definition of that.
Mm-hmm. All right, next we have Trelasara Moon Dancer. Green-white, 2/2, legendary elf cleric. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on Trelasara Moon Dancer and scry 1. So it is gold, but an updated Ajani's Pridemate of sorts. It's an elf and a cleric. Those both can matter.
2 good creature types. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And you get the scry 1, which is not irrelevant. This is pretty easy. Do you support life gain? If you do, is it in green and white? Probably was. This is probably pretty solid. You just want more Johnny's Pridemates.
Yep.
That's kind of what it comes down to, right?
Yep. Yeah. Once you have one, I can probably talk you into more.
Probably as many as you can get for 2 and 3 mana
right.
that have nice effects on them. Okay. Next up, this is a very fun card. Triumphant Adventurer. This is a 1/1 for black and white, and is a human knight. It has Death Touch all the time. As long as it's your turn, it has First Strike. And whenever Triumphant Adventurer attacks, venture into the dungeon. Of course, it is attacking as a First Strike Death Toucher, so unlikely to be blocked by virtually anything. So this is a 2-mana creature that lets you venture into the dungeon basically once a turn for no cost.
So
if you are invested in doing so, then this is probably pretty good. If you don't care about venturing in the dungeon, then you're not going to play this.
There's a card from Invasion called Voracious Cobra. 2 red, green, 2/2, First Strike, a bunch of words that amount to Death Touch.
Yeah.
And when
it's
I
like
was
Basilisk Death Touch.
Yeah, and when I first started playing Magic, it was like one of the early cards that was like some bulk box I bought at the store or whatever. And I thought that was just the coolest juxtaposition of keywords. Very cool that was attached to a snake. Just like First Strike Death Touch on a 2-mana creature, you can just like always attack. That's gonna make its way into combat cubes in a pretty cool way. It's only a 1/1, but whatever. Venturing into the dungeon gives you a little kickback there. I am very upset that this card does not have any party types, because this is just like the exact kind of card that I would want to play in an environment that cared about those creature types. That was like kind of one of the big misses for this set for me. But all the same, if you're doing dungeon things and you're a cube that cares about combat, very, very cool, flavorful card here.
Yep, definitely so.
Right, next we have Volo Guide to Monsters. You might recognize him from the book Volo's Guide to Monsters.
Okay, all right.
For 2 green-blue, it's a 3/2 legendary human wizard. Whenever you cast a creature spell that doesn't share a creature type with a creature you control or a creature card in your graveyard, copy that spell. So a lot of weird bookkeeping here. Like, that's just a ton of tracking with creature types. This card doesn't rank with your Uros and the really gross spiral, the busted Simic cards. However, the effect's very cool and fun. I would be happy to see this card in a cube.
I would like if a cube where this card was good.
Yes.
I'm in for that. It's very rare that there's things that care about anti-tribal, and this is like one of the few cards, and I think that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I like this card as well. This is another one I wish it was a 2/3 instead of a 3/2, but you know, here we are. You're not playing it for the stats anyway, I guess.
Right.
But I'd rather it have a little more survivability.
Yeah, it is a little weird for a wizard. Certainly if we're referencing D&D to be a 3/2, like they're not very strong generally.
Yeah. Also, Volo, based on the art, clearly has had some tussles with monsters. You'd think he'd be a little tougher. Just saying.
Yeah, those things got teeth and claws.
Yeah. You know what else has teeth but not any claws is Xanathar Guild Kingpin. This is a legendary creature, a beholder, and a 5/6 for 4 blue black. It's a mythic rare. And it has the text, the beginning of your upkeep, choose target opponent until end of turn. That player cannot cast spells. You may look at the top card of their library at any time. You may play the top card of their library at any time. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast spells this way. This, I think, fortunately, the effect is insanely powerful, but it does come on a 6-mana creature. It does not take many turns, probably like 1, for you to always leave your opponent with a land on the top of their library. Now, the play patterns of this card are poor because of that. But if you are just wanting like a big flashy finisher for black-blue, this could do the job because it does have a powerful effect and it's a decent body for its size, for its mana cost anyway.
So the miss for me here is that Volo of Volo's Guide to Monsters fame is named Volo Guide to Monsters. I would like to have seen Xanathar of Xanathar's Guide to Everything fame be named Xanathar Guide to Everything.
There is another book that is Xanathar's Guide to Everything.
Yeah.
So Xanathar clearly just smarter than Volo.
Yeah, well, Xanathar has been creeping around, has beheld many things as a beholder.
Yeah. Okay. Well, unfortunately, flavor fail on this one. That is probably likely enough to keep it out of every cube. So we'll scratch this one right off the list.
All right, but we are looking at some cards that are going to make it into more cubes as we go to artifacts. We do have some classically powerful cards. And we'll start with another huge, this is a big flavor win, actually. The Hand of Vecna. It's a 3-mana legendary artifact equipment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, equip creature or a creature you control named Vecna. So there's a combination of cards that gives you a Vecna token. That's where you would get that.
We won't be covering the rest of them.
Right. Yeah. Some of them are pretty bad. But it gets +X till end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your hand. Equip, pay 1 life for each card in your hand, or you can equip for 2 Vecna is a god of secrets, and the Hand of Vecna is an artifact that you have to cut off one of your own hands and replace it with to gain its magic. So literally counting the cards in your hand for the hands and equipment is very cool. Paying life, very appropriate for how the magic would work there. And an equipment that can immediately equip for 0 mana. Assuming you don't mulligan, this thing hits really hard.
Yeah, this card's great. I'm a big fan of the card Grafted War Gear. That has been one of my like hanger honor cards for a lot of cubes that I've made, just because I love that card so much. Time has kind of passed it by for other equipment. But this to me feels like the I guess the updated version of a Grafted War Gear, even though it's using something different to count. But if you curve into this and you still have like 5 or 6 cards in your hand, this thing is just a monster.
Mm-hmm.
And later in the game, when you have the 2 mana, you can equip it for 2, and it's probably still just as good.
Yeah, the issue is later in the game, you won't necessarily have cards in hand. However, there's just more and more stuff all the time where even the aggressive decks can have a good clip of cards or even draw extra cards these days.
Yeah, but even if you have 2, when you've like, equipped it early for the life payment, when you've got in for the big chunks of damage, I think it's still relevant. The only time it's bad is if you're like top decking this and you have nothing in your hand. But I think the upside of this card is pretty massive.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying I do end up there a lot. The card is very good on turn 3, and I think worth it for that reason.
Yeah, I fully agree. Okay. So that's classic. Now, we have another card listed as classic, but I don't believe that I can agree with this card.
I'm looking at this, and if I did that, it was an accident.
Okay. All right. Well, let's call this custom.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Custom Treasure Chest. So this is an artifact for 3 mana. It isn't just an artifact, nothing fancy about it. And you can pay 4, sacrifice treasure chest, and then you roll a d20. And we have a number of options. If you roll a 1, which is bad, you're trapped and you just lose 3 life and you sacrifice treasure chest. Well, you've already sacrificed it, but you don't want to do that. Don't do that. 2 to 9, create 5 treasure tokens. So you're putting 7 mana in to make to get 5 mana, but you are getting 5 artifact tokens, which is generally better than having you're generally getting more than what you put in if you care about artifacts. 4 to 19, you gain 3 life, draw 3 cards. Okay, that's pretty good. That's Ancestral Recall. 2 of the boon cycle, actually. Wow, Healing Salve and Ancestral Recall stapled together for the first time.
You got some Dark Ritual in the 2 to 9 kind of too. I mean,
but you do. And then for a 20, search your library for a card. If it's an artifact card, you may put it on the battlefield. Otherwise, put that card in your hand, then shuffle. Now, if you get an artifact, that's really cool. If you don't, it's like worse than the 10 through 19, which is a little weird. It's a little bit weird. Like, couldn't have been a permanent? Rolling a 20 can't get you any permanent? Are you serious? We have to get an artifact?
It's a treasure.
Like, I understand from a flavor perspective, but like, if I'm like, what was in it? A 20, it was a Mere Battle Sphere. Like, how is that any less flavorful than if I got a Grave Titan?
Yeah, it is more likely that if you get a Mere Battle Sphere, that's actually a trap. That's going to attack you if it's in a treasure chest. So some weird things going on flavorfully where like half of it makes sense, the other half doesn't. You're putting a lot of mana into this card, but it is very cool. And I would like to play with it. I don't know that I ever will.
That's a fair assessment.
All right. Next, we have the Deck of Many Things. This is a really funky D&D mechanic. So there's this magic deck, and you can draw it. They've changed it over the years, but it's been a part of D&D for decades. And it's like this magical deck, and you can draw like up to 4 cards. And about half of them are very bad, and half of them are very good. But in Magic, It's a 5-mana legendary artifact. 2 tap, roll a d20 and subtract the number of cards in your hand. If the result is 0 or less, discard your hand. So there's your bad things. On a 1 to 9, after you've modified it with the cards in your hand, you return a card at random from your graveyard to your hand. 10 to 19, you draw 2 cards. And on a 20, put a creature card from any graveyard on the battlefield under your control. When that creature dies, its owner loses the game. I love that effect because it's really evocative of the deck of many things, because that effect there, it can be incredibly good. Let's say your opponent has Sakura Tribe Elder in their graveyard. Okay, you have lost the game. Thank you for playing. But if your opponent just doesn't have creatures in the graveyard, then you got to bring something back, and suddenly your fate in the game is tied to that creature. So like a huge flavor win here. Again, I'm not sure that I'll ever play with this card, but I do want to.
Yeah, I think this card is very cool. I'm more interested in playing with this card because this is like mono great moments with this card.
Yes.
So I am about that. It is very expensive for the effect, but there are certainly, like, if I saw this in a commander cube, I would easily first pick this card. Not for its power level, but like I just want to play with it.
Yeah, I would first
want to be able to play with this card,
and then I would like take Fabricate over any other card.
Yeah,
and just
exactly.
anything that gave me higher access to the deck of many things.
Yeah, see if I can get the deck of many things, and then just roll with that, literally and figuratively, until the game ends.
Just discard my hand if that's what it takes. That's just activated trying to get the 20 every turn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're searching for that 20. That's just what you want. Okay, so next up, the card that is less exciting, but actually pretty solid. Dungeon Map. This is an artifact for 3 with 2 abilities. Tap to add 1 colorless mana, or tap 3, tap it, venture into the dungeon, activate only as a sorcery. So this is a repeatable venturing into the dungeon for 3 mana on a 3 mana rock. This is a pretty solid card. If you're interested in venturing to the dungeon, I imagine this is a quite a good card in your venturing into the dungeon cube.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty clear line there. I don't think I would include this in another cube that was not venturing into the dungeon, only because it costs you basically 6 mana for your first venture and 3 thereafter, which is still not quite good enough. And the things you're venturing into aren't good enough to get me excited about doing that if your cube's not about it.
Yeah, it's probably generally worse than Bonder's Ornament or Bornament, if you will. But
I won't, but you can.
I will not stop. So here we are.
Okay.
But it does venture into the dungeon, like you said. That's the big draw, mostly a flavorful thing. All right, then we're on lands. So we technically have 5 classically powerful cards here, but we can lump them all together. There's a creature lands. We have a cycle of 5 creature lands here, 1 for every color. Cave of the Frost Dragon is the white one, and these all enter untapped if you control... I guess they enter tapped if you control 2 or more other lands. So
they can be your first or second land to enter untapped.
Yep, exactly. So this one taps for white, or for 4 and a white. Cave of the Frost Dragon becomes a 3/4 white dragon creature with flying until end of turn. It's still a land. The red one is Den of the Bugbear. It taps for red, of course. For 3 and a red until end of turn, Den of the Bugbear becomes a 3/2 red goblin creature with whenever this creature attacks, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token that's tapped and attacking. It's still a land. There's another bugbear for you. We have Hall of Storm Giants, taps for blue. 5 and a blue until end of turn. Hall of Storm Giants becomes a 7/7 blue giant creature with ward 3. It's still a land. Hive of the Eye Tyrant, taps for black. For 3 and a black until end of turn. Becomes a 3/3 black beholder creature with menace, and whenever this creature attacks, exile target card from defending player's graveyard. And Lair of the Hydra, taps for green. For X and a green until end of turn, becomes an XX green Hydra creature. It's still a land. You can't activate it for 0. So these cards, I talked about them in my top 10 cube article from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. I was initially going to do them just as the full cycle as one of my slots, but as I thought about the set more, there's just not that many cards that are especially good for Q. I mean, we didn't have a single classic card in green, which is not a very good sign. And so I spent some time just kind of ranking them. I think the green
Hold on.
Oh, sure.
You've put this in an article.
Yeah.
I would like to present my ranking first.
All right, let's hear it.
Because you have already put yours, and I don't want yours to affect mine, and I've not looked at your ranking.
Fair enough.
Okay, so I'm gonna go 5-1. So 5, the worst one is easily Hive of the Eye Tyrant. That's the black one. Then I'm gonna go number 4. I'm going to go, in maybe a surprising fashion, I'm going to go Cave of the Frost Dragon, which is the 3/4 white one with flying for 5. Then, these are the two that I can't decide between. I think realistically, I'm going to go, and these are very close. These are like I'm splitting hairs. I'm going to go number 3 as Hall of Storm Giants, which is the blue one. And then number 2 is Den of the Bugbear, which is the red one. But those two were like really close for me. But then the best one for sure is Lair of the Hydra.
Okay.
That is my ranking.
So only 2 of these made my top 10. They appear in the order you rank them. I have Lair of the Hydra as the best one. I have Den of the Bugbear as the second best. And I made the note that most cubes that include any are going to include all. I would go more out of my way to include Den of the Bugbear because for my red aggressive decks, I would rather have a mana sink than a 5-drop. So the low opportunity cost is really what makes these cards really interesting and appealing. And then the green decks, just Lair the Hydra, you're just pretty
just
often
making a bunch of mana.
Yeah, you just do that with whatever mana you have or a lot of mana when you run out of stuff. And the other 3, I think like Cave of the Frost Dragon is just a little bit too much mana. White aggressive decks don't really want this, but it's still like fine because the opportunity cost is so low. Hive of the Eye Tyrant is like a really good activation. This is the other 4 mana activation, but you have the problem with black aggressive decks, which is really what hangs you back on this one.
This is like no man's land for where this card fits.
Right. And Hall of Storm Giants, like that thing is huge.
It's huge.
I'm not cutting this for many decks, but I'm not sure that I would draft it particularly highly. Like I don't know how often I'd end up with it, but then I also don't think once I did I would cut it.
When would you ever cut that card?
Yeah, I generally don't think I would.
7/7 is massive. I mean, this is the only one where you can make this your win condition.
That is true. And I do like being really lean on win conditions for control decks.
Yeah. And it has Ward 3. Like, I think there's a lot going for this card. I actually think that one is very close to Den of the Bugbear. Den of the Bugbear is better. Just flat out, it's more aggressive. Provides you with a second body when you attack with it. Even if like late in the game, you can activate it twice and then get 2 of them, which is really cool. The old Raging Ravine trick.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Hall of the Storm Giants is like right behind it. I think those two are very close. But either way, we agreed on the order.
Yeah,
I think.
I think that another thing that solidifies Den of the Bugbear to Hall of Storm Giants 3 is that if we're taking up a colored slot for this, I can cut a red card for Den of the Bugbear. I'll have a lot tougher time cutting a blue card for Hall of Storm Giants.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair, and that matters. Yeah. Either way, I think these are all good. I would probably try to include them as a cycle if possible. Even the bad ones, and I'm putting air quotes around that, are still pretty decent cards. I would certainly include them in my mono-colored sections rather than my land sections. I don't like putting too many mono-colored lands as taking up those slots. I really like them to either do something special, or provide multiple colors of mana for fixing purposes.
Yeah.
But that is how I kind of construct my cubes. I do think that is a good way to do it, even though I'm biased. But obviously, you don't have to listen to me. Do what you want.
Once you have one for every color, then you're kind of splitting hairs, right? Like,
yeah.
Unless you, for some reason, are on a very strict template where you're like 50, 50, 50, and like this card goes over here, it goes over there. But if it's one of each, it if it's 49 cards for every monocolor and you suddenly have 55 lands, like that's not actually different.
That's exactly the same. Yeah. Yeah. You can split them however you want. You can put them, whatever section you want to put it in your cube. But at the end of the night, you know what you did.
Right.
You know, you just put them in those monocolored sections. Okay. This is our last card, Treasure Vault. This is an artifact land, which is 1, fantastic, and 2, a surprise. It has 2 abilities: tap, add 1 colorless, of course, and then tap, sacrifice Treasure Vault, and you pay XX. And when you sacrifice it, you create X treasure. So if you tap 4 mana and sacrifice it, that's 2X twice. So you're going to create 2 treasures. So basically, you're going to get half of the mana back in treasures that you put into it. Now, this is custom because I think for lower rarity cubes and lower power level cubes, this is just whatever. And I think the more powerful you get in a cube, the better this card gets.
Yeah, that is a funny thing about it, where I think that, again, much like the creature lands, this land actually always enters untapped. So the opportunity cost is only as high as your deck cares about playing 1 colorless mana source there. And then if you're talking about Vintage Cube, there's a lot of interactions that really put this card over. Just having an artifact land, if you have Clarion Academy, just an artifact land for Tinker, and then the lower tier of artifact stuff, like this plays really well with Goblin Welder if you're still getting up to that. And then the drop off is steep, even going to Legacy Cube, but there's just so much stuff to do with it in the high powered cube that so it's like it's custom, but it's like really powerful where it's good.
Yes, very much so. Even if like Legacy environment, you're like with Urza.
Yeah.
You know, like just like putting all of your mana into this and then just going nuts. I mean, I think it's just a super sweet card.
Yeah, like making those treasures and then just using them as Moxing with Urza later.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like obviously a bunch of artifact lands do already exist, but you see the Sidon being like the blue land that doesn't really show up. This being
that's not worth a cube slot.
Yeah, exactly.
See, the Sidon's not worth a cube slot. This actually has additional utility on top of just being an artifact. Being artifact land on its own is just not good enough, and this card like splits the difference between not adding colored mana but providing a lot more utility for like specialty reasons and still being an artifact land at the same time.
Yeah, and just over the course of enough games, you will just make those treasure tokens to cast spells in a way that matters, which is something that the other artifact lands did not provide.
Yes, definitely. Also, you don't have to do this at sorcery speed, which is thank God. Because like this is the type of card I would think they'd just throw that rider on for no reason, but I'm glad they did.
Yeah, that definitely is significant, especially with how many cards we've talked about in this set. That's just like, did this really have to be once per turn? And this one does just kind of let you do what you want.
I know, thank goodness. Oh man. Well, Ryan, I believe we've come to the end of our adventuring in the Forgotten Realm.
Yeah.
Is there any other card you wanted to talk about?
That's
we go.
Gonna be it here. I mean, there's another Commander release, but I haven't even really looked at those. And those ones, they don't look like they're actually offering a lot for heads up play so far from what I've seen.
Well, they are offering, you know how they did the mechanic of roll a d20 in this set?
Yeah.
Which I was really appreciative of. I was like, oh, it's really nice. It's just a d20. Not so in Commander. There's a card that makes you roll a d4, a d6, a d8, a d10, and a d12. And d20.
I forgot what it did, but I remember really liking the d4 card. But yeah, it does require you to have a variety of dice.
Yeah, I don't. It's just so I'm out, I guess. But either way, I don't know. We'll think about those. Maybe we'll chat about those and see if that's something we want to cover. But I honestly, I have not looked really deeply into those cards either. Maybe if there's like a small handful that we want to talk about, we'll touch on them next week. Who knows?
The reason I bring it up
promises.
is like I just don't think we're going to talk about them.
There is one card, but we can talk about that next week.
Okay, fair enough. Oh, actually,
Either
there is a card that I like. It's a wizard or something. No, it's
I'm
a rogue.
sure
It's
is.
a rogue, actually.
Oh, it is a rogue.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so maybe we'll have like 2 or 3 cards to talk about next week then.
Nice.
So, all right. Anyway, that's the 540. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon, Stitcher, YouTube, any of your local podcast applications, wherever you're listening right now. Leave us a review where you can, a 5-star review if you're able. Any text reviews will always help. We've had people telling us this is the okayest podcast we've ever listened to. We really appreciate that. It's always quite nice when you leave us such complimentary compliments. You can find me at jparnell1 on Twitter and my other podcast, Think Twice MTG, which you can find wherever you are listening to this podcast, as well as my face and voice on Commander Versus every week on StarCityGames.com and YouTube. Ryan, what do you got?
You can find me at Ryan Overdrive on Twitter. You can find my articles weekly on StarCityGames.com. When we have cubes, Spotlight Cubes and Magic Online, or even just the regular offerings come back in rotation, I do a breakdown on all of those. Not really sure when one of those is coming up, but I would not be surprised if this Tuesday that happened. So you might have already read an article by me this week about that. I don't know, but you do. That's the nature of our recording and release schedule. But I also read about a lot of other cube stuff. I have some more Tuberts content in the holster here. Been working on that a lot. So if you like those 180 card cubes, the well is not dry, not by a long shot. But any updates on that? Find the articles on Star City Games. Find updates about me and all my content at Ryan Overdrive on Twitter.
Beautiful. I don't think we have another set coming out next week, but I would certainly not promise it. They could sneak one in between now and the next time we record, but chances are we're not going to have one. So we may have a little bit of a break on doing set reviews because we've done a lot of them in the last however many weeks. 5 out of 6 weeks. So that's a lot. Anyway, thank you for listening to the 540. We will catch you all next time.